Hello and welcome to the Yerky Boys. May the Kandrona shine and strengthen you. My name is Will,
My name is Jonathan.
and we are
The Yerky Boys. Did we do it good?
I think we did it.
Okay. I bet it was good.
Yeah, that was good. We've only been doing this like 100 times.
Yeah, over 100.
Wow.
Yeah. This is a real we're at a big milestone in our career at this point.
hmm We have now finished both the books and the TV show of Animorphs. So that's a milestone, I think.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. So if we're done with those, what could we possibly still be doing here?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question.
So I thought maybe that would be sort of a segue for you to introduce this episode.
Oh, I was thinking maybe we were done. So this
Oh.
episode,
You thought it was a rhetorical question. That was the end. We
right?
would just leave.
Yeah, it's all over now. What the hell are we? This
Baby blue.
episode, we are going to be talking about our visions for an adaptation. Like if we were going to make an adaptation of the book series as opposed to this TV show that we just watched. And this is also, I guess, kind of an opportunity to tangentially give some thoughts on how the TV show did things in general. I think we largely covered that. I don't think we need a full episode dedicated just to overview the way we did for the book series, but we'll go over that to some extent as well.
Yeah, I think why don't we start there? Because last week we finished with the finale. Oh, whether or not it was intended as the finale, it was one.
Yes.
And listeners may recall, if they made it through, that was over 3 hours long, and by the end of it, I just wanted to leave. And we didn't really have a chance to do a full processing of the end. So we've now completed this full journey, 26 episodes of Animorphs television.
Is that how many it is?
I believe so.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah.
And I feel like as we went through the show, we had ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
And initially we were sort of optimistic about it or hopeful that things might improve or get better. And then sometimes maybe we thought, oh, things are getting better, and then they would get bad again. Now that we've seen this whole thing of a piece, I guess that's a phrase I can use. How do we feel about this show in its larger context?
Mm-hmm.
The question that I always think of is, would you recommend this to anyone, and who? So I don't know. What's your final, like, if you had to rate this show as a whole on a scale of 1 to 10, where does it sit?
Not very high. I would not recommend this show, I don't think. Like even if you are an Animorphs fan, I listen, you can go watch it if you want. I don't think that it is such a disaster that it's like the worst thing in the world, but it's like, this is not going to enrich your life. Like, even if you're like, I love Animorphs and I want all of like, you're not going to be better off for having watched this. You're just going to like know what happened now,
You're saying there are better uses of your time than watching this episode?
That's what I'm saying. Even if you love Animorphs.
Wow. It's a good thing we didn't lead with this, or people wouldn't have listened to those episodes.
Right, yeah. Well, I didn't know at that point.
Well, it's not a waste of time to listen to us talk about them. Which
not at all.
Which takes a remarkably larger amount of time than just watching the show itself.
Well, you get to hear the melodious sound of our voices.
Oh, so melodious.
Situation. Yeah, and you all love that.
I will say, the Animorphs TV show, there are worse shows.
I'd agree with that, yeah.
A few of them we watched on our Patreon. I would say the only circumstances under which I would recommend this show to anyone is A, if you are a fan of Animorphs books and you're just curious to see how they did it. Or B, if you watched the show maybe as a kid and you have nostalgia for it. But other than that, there's not really a reason to. And like you said, if you like the books and you don't watch the show, it's fine. Now that said, I do think, and this was something that kind of came up here and there as we discussed the episodes. I think season 2 was starting to show, in some regards, I don't want to say promise. That feels too strong.
Mhm.
But I think in some ways, I was starting to see season 2 feel like more of a cohesive product. Feel like there was more of a through line, a cohesive vision to the show as compared to season 1, which felt very scattered and haphazard and like they weren't even talking to each other about episodes connecting or props or editing. It was just kind of all over the place. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but even when it was good, it was still odd,
Mhm.
or unprofessional or amateurish. And also I think season 2, I was starting to see it become, in some ways, the vibe I think was a little closer to the books. There's still obviously a lot of big differences, but I think as far as like translating the books for sort of a Nickelodeon audience, I was starting to see the pieces come together. Rachel was a bear.
Mhm.
There were like little things. Tobias was a boy. Like they were starting to coalesce to a place where I do think, had they finished out season 2 or even gotten to season 3, I think the show was starting to get to a place where at least it had a sense of what it was and what it was setting out to do. Whereas season 1, like I said, just felt like it was all over the place. Ironically, season 2 is so short that it also feels like, what I'm saying is kind of a moot point because there wasn't enough time for it to actually come together to do anything.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I would like to see a universe where they got to do like another 15 episodes. I think that would be interesting. And I think there are some things, as we'll get to when we talk about our own things, there's some things that I would take from the show or that I think they did that were good decisions. But yes, by and large, not a great show.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. I think that the show on the whole, I first of all, I do think that season 2 to me does feel like if season 2 had been allowed to run its course and actually have a full season, um they might have done enough and progressed enough over that season that season 3 could have been decent, like pretty
Mhm.
good.
I
Which,
mean, look,
you know,
there's show. This used to be the case. We live today in the streaming
mhm,
world where you can't make this happen anymore. But the first 22 episode season of Star Trek: The Next Generation is not good.
mhm,
Like that show doesn't really get good until season 3.
mhm,
Like this is a thing that used to happen. It used to be that shows were just on and eventually they figured it out because they had the time to do so. And now it's like if you're not fucking great out the gate, I mean, also the Animorphs is old too, so theoretically it could have existed in that same time period. But yeah, like that's not crazy to me. Some of my favorite shows were bad in the beginning.
mhm.
Like there is a world where there's 10 seasons of Animorphs and it's like, oh, you just got to get through the first couple, you know?
Yeah. There is a world, I agree, there is absolutely a world like that. Um, I also think that, going into this show, as far as adaptations go, I 100% would have said, like, you kind of have to do this animated. And I really want to see, and like, while I do want to see these like more human drama things play out more, I want to see more things in the school. I want to see more stuff with Jake and his brother. I do still want the heavy focus to be on like, oh, Hork-Bajir freedom fighters, right? Crazy Yerk Drake on Visser 3 morphs a giant monster. And like for this, you need animation. And so ideally you just have to do it animated or it's like not gonna be good. And watching this show, I do see a world in which there's a live action show that just doesn't do that stuff. That just is like, listen, Visser 3 is just always a human. We don't really talk about the Hork-Bajir. We're pretty much only doing the more grounded at school, at home, uh Yerk things, and all the characters are just, and that could still be something that's very entertaining and good. And I think this show kind of did sell me a little bit on the idea that that could work and be good and I would enjoy it, even though the show itself doesn't really do that at all.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Like I
yeah.
can see the potential.
Like you can take kind of the framework of Animorphs and yeah, just like you said, focus on those more
Hmm.
grounded elements and you could have something there.
Yeah.
I'll also
Yeah,
say like
like
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, cut 90+% of the stories and write new ones that are all grounded, and it would still
Yeah.
be good. Like, I wouldn't be sitting
Yeah.
over here like, "Where's Toby?" You know?
It's basically the first like 5 or 6 Animorphs books. Just like take that tone before you really got to the
Mhm.
insane shit, even though they did do the Elemist and the Chi weirdly.
Right.
But like you know, in the first like 10 books or so, it was more like that. It was much more of a like you could understand this just being kind of a monster of the week Nickelodeon show,
Mhm.
but it quickly develops into insanity beyond
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, that insanity is my favorite part, and in my ideal adaptation, it would still be all that insanity, but I think I
We're not
could
there
still
yet.
really enjoy it without it.
Yeah. I also think the show did even though I mean we bitched about it a lot, especially for certain characters. I think maybe it's just they grew on me by the end. But by and
Mhm.
large, I think the casting was pretty good. You know, Brooke Nevin was definitely the weak point, but even in season 2, we were commenting she was markedly better. And
Yeah,
a lot of that was the script not serving her too.
yeah, I think that is a combination of the script not serving her at all and her being by far the youngest. I think that, if they had just, time matrixed her up a couple of years and written her like to the same degree that they wrote the other, characters, I wouldn't have that problem.
But I think with the exception of Eric, maybe none of the like when I see those Animorphs, it's none of them go, oh, in my head, that's not what Tobias looks like. Get the fuck out of
Hmm.
here. Like, no, that's and maybe some of this is from me watching it as a kid, so maybe that's like
Hmm.
baked into my brain already in a weird way. But I thought they did a pretty good job matching the spirit of the characters to the actors they cast.
Yeah, like if I had to make any casting issues, I like the only thing that I would go at would be like maybe Cassie. Because I think she is supposed to be a lot like dumpier in the books, right? like legit. Like you could just be
I
all
know.
like
You wanted
but
her to
but
have a
part of that's
pig
also
pen dust
presentation
cloud.
too, right? Like some
Hmm.
of that is just like I bet Nadia could have been a lot dumpier if uh
Hey,
if they
you're
just made her look like that.
well, I just careful. You're talking about my future wife. I don't know if you could if you tried.
You just smear some more shit all over her face, it'd be fine. She's gotta get
Jesus
covered in
Christ.
goose manure, whatever the fuck.
Oh, she's gotta have her arm,
Yeah,
ankle, elbow deep. What's on an arm again? An ankle or an elbow? Elbow deep in a goose,
that's right.
as I like to say. Yeah. So I don't regret watching it. I will say I'm more excited for this episode than I have been for any episode in months, probably.
Reasonable.
It was just a bit. I mean, that was the one real downside of season 2 that makes me prefer season 1 is the loss of Visser 3.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that was bad. Eugene Lipinski, he nailed what Visser 3 should have been for
Yeah.
this particular tone. Like, you could have rewritten him to be not like that, but, like, that would have been a total like, you'd have to do something from the ground up.
I mean that is what he's like in the books too.
Right, yeah, that's kinda what
Yeah.
I mean, like, you can't just say, like, "Well, let's be more faithful to the books." You have to make a totally new character if you're not gonna do that.
Yeah. So, yes, a mixed bag, not the worst thing in the world, but I do not begrudge anyone in the fan community who, you know, hates this show.
Mhm,
I certainly don't begrudge Kay Applegate and Michael Grant for having
yeah.
what sounds like a pretty bad experience behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I mean, especially because this is the only adaptation you get, right? So if the only adaptation you get is one where you're like, even if you like the show, you don't bother. Like, that's disappointing, right? That's kinda like, "Come on." Right? Come on, I'd almost
Yeah.
rather we don't have one, because then I could say we need one, as opposed to like, no, you
Mhm.
already have one. It just sucks.
And that's also that could be a thing in Hollywood where potentially if someone wants to make an Animorphs, a producer might point to this and say, "Well, it didn't work before, so we're not going to do it again."
Right.
Yeah, imagine a world where Animorphs somehow took off like Power Rangers and there's just it's everywhere and it became a phenomenon even bigger than it was. I don't even know if we want to live in that world.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I do either.
Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about some of that stuff. You know what episode I think that maybe we did misunderstand and maybe didn't give enough credit to or detailed analysis of? I'm of course
I don't know
referring
where you're going.
of course I'm referring to season 2 episode 3, The Front, which is a great transition to this week's sharing.
Oh, the sharing. I wasn't sure if
So,
there was going to be one since we didn't lead off on it.
yeah, well, that's because I'm doing we're weaving it in.
I thought maybe everyone had stopped listening to our show, and even though we asked for emails, we just didn't get them because
No, we got some.
fuck it. Okay, cool.
This email here comes in from one of our good friends, Gwen.
One of our best friends, my third best friend.
Yeah, who I think jury's still out. We think it might be Gwen Stacy, but we're not sure.
Yeah, I think, yeah, we're not sure.
And Gwen wrote, "Hello, Yerky comrades. As a fellow Ancom, I don't actually know what that means. Should I know what the Animorphs com? What does that mean?
Presumably anarcho-communist? Like anarcho-capital?
Oh,
Does that even make
that makes
sense? I have
sense.
no fucking idea. Listen.
Oh, yeah. That must be what it is because that's what you'll see when the context comes in. I thought this was like an Animorphs fan term.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it, right? Listen, despite all of my radical talk, I don't read theory. I will never read a book. Uh,
Mhm. Yeah, despite
sorry,
all my
Gwen.
rage, I'm still just a yerk in a cage. In a brain? Let me write this down. I gotta do that one. Okay. So anyway, Gwen's here to educate us.
Okay,
As
good.
a fellow Ancom, I enjoyed your thorough deconstruction of Animorphs Season 2, Episode 3, The Front. However, I posit that it is not actually capitalist propaganda by imperialist Yankee pig dogs, but instead clever and subtle satire. So here are a few quick notes I made on a rewatch. Just to remind everyone, The Front is the episode in which Axe gets a job at the mall selling phones, and the phones turn out to have yerks in them. And there's a scene where Jake tells Axe about the beauty of getting a job for money and how good that is.
Right,
So,
yes.
Gwen, here's some of Gwen's notes. We'll see if they change your view of the episode. The very first dialogue exchange in the episode between Marco and Jake, I think I need a pair of shoes, etc., is a parody of then modern consumer culture. What appears at first to be subpar ADR work is actually an example of symbolically discomforting editing. Just as the desire for unnecessary product is placed in Marco's mind, the words are placed over his unmoving lips. Okay. Think
Mhm.
about it. As Marco and
I'm
Jake
thinking.
walk away, Axe trips on the escalator. Could there be a better symbol of consumer culture taking advantage of the uneducated? He stands alone and bewildered, eyes wide and frightened, an outsider confused by the strange society humanity has built. Immediately after, Marco's appreciation of malls is abruptly rejoined by a moment of enforced heterosexuality from Jake. He says, "And what about girls?" We see that this consumer culture must create norms in order to exploit the populace. Axe's misunderstanding of 250, he thinks it means 250 instead of 250, is a satirical depiction of how much subtle information the consumer is expected to process, most of it deliberately unexplained. Jake's statement, "If anyone could buy anything, no one could go to work," is a direct riff on Margaret Thatcher's "There is no alternative." Even though even the supposed hero of our story is ignorant of more freeing economic systems and is driven by societal influence to reinforce existing norms rather than admit to the potential of alternative economic systems. The harder you work, the more you get paid, he says, as if the Animorphs' unpaid guerrilla warfare does not count as hard work. Gustav's bizarre fashion choices are, from a Doylist perspective, the result of overlapping several different styles favored by various petite bourgeois. How do you say that?
Aren't
Bourgeoisie.
you the guy who knows about French?
Yeah, but I always struggle with that word. I always get it wrong.
I think you got it
Bouge-
right.
but then people just say bougie because they don't want to pronounce it. So I'm like,
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, in
bourgeoisie.
America, we take phrases from other languages and then pronounce them differently, and that's correct now. So,
Anyway,
however you say it is right because you're an American.
Gustav's store's lack of name and strange product line are similarly the result of abstracting the concept of store to its absurd core. Axe isn't able to recognize the yerk behind his eyes due to yellow glasses, just as the workers will never be able to see eye to eye with capitalist power. I'm going to tell you right now, there is kind of a lot more of this, and I sort of do want to read it all, but maybe I shouldn't.
I mean, my thoughts so far are, Gwen, if you can keep this up for the length of an average Yerky Boys episode, you will have made a new pipe strip here, I think. That's the vibe I'm getting off of this.
Okay, then people will not know what that means, probably.
Everybody fucking knows what the pipe strip is. There's no
Okay.
way that people listening to this podcast don't know what the pipe strip
I
is.
think it's not unreasonable to imagine some of them might not.
I think that's unreasonable. I
Well,
can't even conceive of such a thing.
it's fine. They can Google it. Educate yourself. It's not our job to educate you.
Find that fucking music they play and play it behind this email.
Anyway, Axe is offered a job, some more notes, within 30 seconds of meeting Gustav and is given no training. This is an obvious parody of the right wing's narrative that anyone out of work is simply lazy or unwilling. The other Animorphs express pride in Axe's new employment, even though his being employed can only be a hindrance to their anti-Yerk operations. I need hardly explain that this is a jab at capitalist society's fetishization of work at the expense of the environment, work-life balance, and even usefulness. I'm going to skim down to some of these. Tom asking Chapman for permission to put a Yerk in his daughter is a grotesque parody of patriarchal father's permission traditions with regards to marriage. As you noted, Tom's entrapment of Melissa is presented as a predatory date, and Jake's attempts at interference are shown as being akin to romantic rivalry. Even our hero is subservient to dominant hierarchical structures. The workers, Jake, are only able to battle the forces of capital, Tom, on capital's terms of engagement, predatory relationships. Notice how Rachel is able to save her by seeing and relating to her as a friend and human instead of as a potential date. Eric's appearance represents Lada Continua during the Italian years of lead.
Okay.
Do you know what the fuck that means?
Okay, you've actually lost me at this point.
I did Google Italian years of lead. I didn't look up Lada Continua maybe is how you say it. I don't know. I don't know who that is.
Is this like
So now you've officially, I mean, I think it happened a long time ago.
Passed me by.
Let's see. Consumer Guy's appearance as a message to the viewers to rise up through infiltrationalism and direct action. As Jello Biafra said, don't hate the media, become the media. Axe's use of a water gun to stop the bad guys is a fun visual gag. You know, just something funny I noticed. Nothing representative or symbolic about it. Just thought it was funny. Smiley face. Although the end is essentially a happy ending, as Mark Fisher wrote in Capitalist Realism, the film performs our anti-capitalism for us, allowing us to continue to consume with impunity. The show writers, aware of this, therefore end the show by displaying the Animorphs tragically continuing to perpetuate capitalism. Axe bemoans his lack of a job, despite it being an absurd and counterproductive desire for him to have. He then gives Jake and Marco abstracted widgets and admits he doesn't know what they are. Before cheerfully reciting a capitalist slogan, at prices like this, you can't afford not to buy. Jake and Marco proceed to pointlessly bicker over who gets which one. Even though they had no desire for them and don't know what they are, capital has made them want. As Jake notes, Melissa's safe for now. The day has not been saved, and if the Animorphs can't do it, who can? The responsibility falls onto the viewer to destroy capitalism, to usher in the beautiful new world that is possible and reachable in our lifetimes. Do you see it, comrades? A world free from hierarchy, from oppression and exploitation. A world where all humans live in balance, nature, where free organization results in happy living for all people. A world where time is dominated not by labor, but by joyous work and creation and collaboration. Rise, rise, rise!
I'm getting all hype from your reading here.
Oh, and Tobias's leather jacket is a nod to punk culture. Yours in the struggle, Gwen.
So what I'm getting, reading between the lines of this email,
Uh,
is that what Gwen is saying
mhm.
is that you can pretty much say anything you want about anything, and you can continue on for 2.5 hours,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to actually like follow, or like you can make any argument you want or say any words you want about any piece of art, and it doesn't really matter what the original piece was.
Yeah.
And it feels like a little bit of a dig at the podcast.
Hmm.
It feels like maybe
How
she's
so?
saying that everything we're saying is completely worthless, and it's
Huh.
not worth listening to us for 2 hours straight. I'm kind of
Huh.
taking a bit of offense at it.
Well, I think it's death of the author, right?
Hmm. In what sense?
You know, I think maybe Michael Grant died. Oh no, he's still around.
That's possible. Could have happened. I haven't
Yeah,
checked recently.
depends when you're listening to this.
That's true.
Eventually, it'll be true. By the way, the subject of this line said, "Don't feel the need to actually read this on air. Thought it might be
Hmm.
funny. Sorry if it isn't." To which I say, Gwen, I had to read this on the air.
Yeah.
And don't ever apologize for something not being funny because look who you're talking to.
Yeah, right, exactly. Listen, even if you're not being funny, it can still be funny that you wasted our time as long as you
Oh
don't
yeah.
apologize for it.
I mean, I
So,
like that we're
works
30
either
minutes
way.
into the episode and we haven't started our subject matter.
I like the email. Listen, if
It's a
if John
great
didn't
email.
read it on the air, then I wouldn't have read it because I don't look at the
Uh-huh.
emails. So I'm happy to hear it on the air. I liked it.
I liked it, and I think it's a good. I mean, it's clear why Gwen likes our show. You call it a. You think it's a satire of our show. I think it's. I think it's no tongue in cheek.
It's an
This is
homage.
yeah. Right. The tip of the hat.
Right.
And I agree with all the points. I think they're great points. So anyway, that is going to
Yeah,
be the
all
last
correct.
word on the Animorphs TV show,
Okay.
more or
Yeah,
less.
that's a good
More
last
or
word, I
less.
think. Yeah, more or less.
Now we're going to transition. Thanks for that email. We're going to transition into our adaptation visions, the theme of the episode, through one more email that I'm going to read.
Okay.
A shorter one.
Good. I'm glad we got some more because otherwise we wouldn't be able to fill out the time.
Yeah. Still probably going to be a shorter episode compared to last week. This one comes in from a new writer.
Whoa, we're still getting those.
Mm-hmm. This comes from John with an H. It's not me.
Oh, okay.
Who says, "Greetings, Yerky boys. May the Kandrona shine and strengthen you." And with you, and also with you.
Yeah, and also with you.
Contemporary listener here, writing in to thank you for making the best Animorphs podcast. You hear that, Gwen?
Hell yes. This
Number
is my
one.
favorite listener.
Last year, I reread the series, which doesn't take long at all, given the brevity of each book and the ever-increasing amounts of exposition and repetition and over-the-top onomatopoeias. Because I had a lot of time to kill at work. I decided to scope which Animorphs podcasts were currently active, sort of like a companion piece during the reread. What I found was that your podcast was the only one both actively updating on a consistent basis and closing in on the end of the series. So that's why
Hell
we're the
yeah.
best, is because we just happened to be at the right time.
Listen, the fact that we did, in fact, put out a book a week consistently without just stopping halfway through, I think that
That's
already
something.
probably puts us in the top 10% on its own.
Sure. John continues, "I started listening from the beginning, caught up to real time around when you were starting the TV series, and have been listening ever since. You guys take hyperfixation as humor to the next level. The ad read episode was podcast Commedia dell'arte. Is that how you say that one?
I don't even know what that is.
Well, it's because you're not as educated as I.
Yeah,
I'd
well,
never
you're an
once.
art history guy.
Right. I'd never once in my life cared about what was going on in the bright hole because they're
What?
barely in this dumb alien cave for 2 pages.
All right, least favorite listener now.
And it's just a location for them to blow up anyway.
No.
But
No.
now I'm a bright hole conservationist.
Never mind. New favorite listener again.
You converted, John.
Wow.
I think I still lean towards dumb alien cave. Anyway, so that's the section of the email that's just masturbatory praise for me to read.
That's the part I like.
I do love hyperfixation as humor. That really puts a pin on exactly what we do here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not
When you
intentionally.
phrase it
We're not
that way,
trying to be funny. That's just that's just who we are.
Right.
We're fucking, we can't help ourselves. Anyway, John writes, weighing in on how an Animorphs show could be done. That's right, folks. The subject of today's episode. I think the conversation has changed a lot in the modern media landscape. What we saw in the 99-2000 show was how Nickelodeon created an Animorphs show by utilizing all those Goosebumps connections through their Canadian production companies. Yeah? Content creation has since shifted to streaming media, various studios all getting funded by the same major sources for their temporarily exclusive content. How does Netflix Animorphs look different from HBO Animorphs? Would anyone even remember an Amazon Animorphs? Anyway, I'd like to see this series animated by the team who did Scavenger's Reign. That shit'd look rad, and they know how to draw some compelling sci-fi environments. Thanks for the great show. Thank you, John. I don't know if we want to directly respond to this stuff right now, because we are going to touch on all those things.
Mm-hmm. Do
But
you
it
know
is-
what Scavenger's Reign is?
Not only do I know what Scavenger's Reign is,
Mm-hmm.
it was my number 3 favorite TV show a year ago of the year.
Wow. I guess I should have watched your favorite TV show list. But
That's
I don't
right,
watch
it's on-
TV,
on
so I
YouTube.
didn't bother with that. I only
It's
watched
on
your
you-
movies.
It's on YouTube. You can watch that now. And I planned to bring that show up in today's episode before even reading this email. So John and I are on the same wavelength. I'll talk about it maybe more in depth in a bit.
Are you sure this isn't you?
It might be me.
You just writes a paragraph jerking yourself off and then another paragraph about your opinions to segue us.
Might be me. Might just be me. Tricked you, everybody. No, but these are good general ideas of networks and things. We're going to kind of have some conversations about that. I think a good kickoff, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, John, for that, for the kind words and for the thoughts on the show. If anyone else wants to email in before the end, which is, you still have a few months.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can do so, theyerkyboys@gmail.com. And while we're here, we'll plug the Patreon, patreon.com/theyerkyboys. $5 a month to get bonus episodes every single week. If you're writing an email, you probably will like the show enough to get the Patreon. I can tell you that.
That's true.
Okay. Or, just the best Animorphs podcast, I guess, isn't worthy of your $5 fucking dollars. Whatever. I immediately turned on him. All right. So, the actual meat of our show today. That was the main. That was the appetizer. Now it's the main course.
Is this our longest before we've begun ever?
No, we have absolutely been past 40 minutes of talking about the cover of a book. 100%.
Well, cover isn't. We've started by the time we're on the cover.
Oh, okay, I see. The cover to you is starting.
Right, yeah. That's important.
I do think this episode is still probably going to be on the shorter side. I don't think we're going over 2 hours today. But I could be wrong.
You can look and see. You listeners already know.
Yeah, why do I knock on wood? I don't know why I make call these shots asking for trouble. But yeah, we're talking about how we would do an Animorphs adaptation to our
Hmm.
ideal world. Now, there's a few. I don't know if you want to start with this. Do you have any thoughts about how to go about this, or you want me to throw some things out there?
I have some like very general ideas, but I have thoughts on like any particular way. So if you have something you want to get started with, it's probably more natural than whatever I would say.
Well, I feel like there's a couple things. First of all, there's movies versus TV.
Hmm.
And I think I would like to discuss both as like what would your
Yeah,
movie vision be? What would your TV vision be?
100%. And I have several visions for each. So like, I don't know. Do you want to just like split it up and like do one and then the other, or?
Yeah, I think that's yes. I think maybe that's generally how we should do it. I do think there are some. I mean, there's a few big picture items that I think could kind of apply to both. That maybe we talk about up front, and then get into specifics about each one.
Hmm.
So, like th- the first thing, the first big question to me, we kind of have alluded to it already, is the choice of whether or not you go animated or live action.
Hmm.
Um, and you were indicating before that at least initially before watching the show, you thought, oh, the only way to do this is animated, blah blah blah. And also, I think I sort of also thought of this exercise as in some ways it's my pie in the sky vision, but it's in some ways I'm also trying to think of what is somewhat feasible that they would actually make. So
Right.
I'm sort of trying to ground myself in real world media politics as opposed to just like, oh, fucking Christopher Nolan should direct it and it should be a series of 50 movies with the unlimited budget, Like I'm trying to be kind of at least a little realistic about it, right?
Right. Like as an example here, I do have a section under movies called Abstract Art House Father Movie, which you might remember I brought up on Ellimist, and it has two notes. It says pros, this is what I want. Cons, this is not what anyone else in the world wants. And so like that would be a good example of that, I think.
Yeah, right. So let's start there. Unless you think this, I mean, I don't know. Let's just start there. For you, animated versus live action, what's your preference, and does it differ between depending on the medium?
I think it does. So, I think that if I'm doing a TV show and I'm trying to do a long running series that hits a whole bunch of different points, um, tells a long form story, I prefer to have it animated. I think you could have a live action TV show, but I have a very different vision of how that would be good. Like my idea of what you might do with that doesn't look the same at all. Um, I think that that almost is like, that like changes the medium. When it comes to movies, I'm a lot more open to kind of one or the other. And I do think part of that is because like what is the difference between an animated movie and a movie in which everything is CG? Like is are the Avatar movies animated? Like, in a sense, they kind of are, right? So,
Mufasa.
like, there's a lot of wiggle room on that storytelling when you have, like, a ton of budget to throw at a very short story, as opposed to having to be like, "Okay, but, like, you gotta keep up this level of, like, visuals forever."
Well, when I talk about animation in this context, I am pretty much exclusively
Mhm.
picturing 2D animation, hand drawn animation.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought much about the idea of like a Pixar style Animorphs, which could maybe work, but I'm just so I just like the 2D animation so
Yeah.
much more.
That is kinda what I'm saying here too, like, as well. Like, in a movie, though, I still think that you have a lot more wiggle room on that. Like I'm a lot more open to just being like, yeah, you could do it either way and have it be really good. I think it would
Yeah.
just kind of depend on how you do it.
My position on this is I would love a live action TV show. However, I think that for the if you're staying pretty faithful to the books, it just doesn't make sense for a number of reasons to go that
Hmm.
way. One of the chief among them being because the kids are constantly animals,
Hmm.
that creates issues with not seeing the actors. Same with like Axe being an Andalite or a human. And is that we even saw this in the TV show that, we grew attached to Paolo Costanzo. And when he
Yes.
looks like an Andalite, you're kind of like, well, that's not the Axe I want to see. Same with Visser 3, which I think is a problem. And you solve that with animation. And
Yes.
obviously, there's just so much crazy shit that lends itself more to animation.
Yeah. So
Um,
so I guess let's stick with the TV show. So I would agree that for a TV show, I far prefer
yeah.
an animated TV show. And obviously, I want a 2D animated thing. It just looks better. We need more of it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think that where 2D animation is really gonna shine is the like high concept sci-fi stuff, right? And that includes turning into animals. Um, for one thing, like if you do even if you do CG, right? Like I don't have to use real animals. I'm going to use CG animals. You still have to kind of like if I want to feel for these animals, they have to emote to some degree.
Mhm. Yeah.
And real animals can emote, right? It doesn't have to be like the fucking Lion King where everything looks shitty all the time. But uh animated animals, they don't have to be very realistic at all. You have a lot more freedom to do things with their body language or facial expressions that would just look strange or out of place on a more realistic animal, which is what you would want to do if you had if you had live action human beings. It would look really weird if you had a live action human being turn into fucking, Simba from the animated Lion King. You'd be like, what the hell? This style is totally different. Um,
Mhm.
and so that's really going to help you bridge that gap, as you said, right? Like, I'm connected to the human actor, and then I just see a dog, right? It's like, no, the dog can emote the same as the human. I can make Marco the dog
Yeah.
have a face that looks like Marco's face, even though that's not realistic, and that helps me connect with it, type of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it is as much as there is like a vision in my head of a live action series that I would want to
Mhm.
see just because I think that would be cool. I just think logistically it's so much harder to do
Yeah.
that well.
Yeah, and you get
Um
so much more freedom to do things with, like, the Drode. Like, the
yes.
Drode can get fucking crazy if you're
Yes.
going animated. You don't have to follow any rules if it's animated, whereas in live action, it's like the Drode does have to kind of, like, exist and interact with a real space, however you're putting them in
And
here.
also, like, the kids getting older, so you have
Right.
to worry about that. There's just so many issues that it makes sense. Now, that said, I kind of feel the opposite for the movies. I feel like if we were doing a movie version of it, to me, you go live action. That's the choice because,
Mhm.
well, we'll talk more when we get more specifics about the movies, but I just think that's the reason you want to see it as a movie is you want to see that budget and you want to see it go
Mhm.
crazy. And also the simple fact that there are very few. I mean, again, I'm thinking there's no other than the Lord of the Rings thing that came out last
Mhm.
year. There's no like 2D, or I guess the Porky Pig one too. Maybe there's a renaissance of 2D animated movies right now. Um,
Please, God.
but I just think it makes more sense. You want this to be your, you want it to be in that world of the Harry Potters, the Percy Jacksons, whatever the fuck,
Y That's yeah, that's not
Narnia.
unreasonable. But I guess one of the things that I will say is I think how open I am to it being animated as a movie versus leaning toward live action does depend on which movie we're talking about, because I think there are a lot of different paths you
Yes,
could go with
yes,
these movies.
yes.
Um, yeah, and we can talk about that.
Yes, that's very correct. And yeah, we'll get to that. Okay. My next point here to discuss if if you're doing a live action show or movie, casting choices for the characters.
Mm. I'm not gonna have if you want me to put names on these things, I'm not gonna be very good at that. You can list off your casting choices.
Well, here's the thing that is interesting about it because
Mhm,
I think for me the all of the kids,
mhm.
including Axe, should be unknowns. And I
Okay.
find it even difficult to, like, if we were going to do a hypothetical dream casting thing, like, how do you even, like, I can't even name enough young actors. I'd just be like, I guess Cassie is Zendaya and Timothy Chalamet is Jake, and they're like 29, so it doesn't really work. Like Finn Wolfhard is fucking Tobias, like I just
Mhm,
can't come up with enough young actors. But I think it makes the most sense to, once again, I'm sorry, Harry Potter style.
mhm,
You make the kids are fresh talents that you can
mhm,
mold into what you want them to be. Not in a creepy way. And the adult characters are where you can put your
mm.
interesting big name actors.
So, I guess here's a question with regards to that. Is there a difference? Do you change the ages of the kids for live action? And is
That's
there a
another one of my
difference between that
things.
and animation? If you're casting, like when you're going to cast these unknowns, are you casting how young? Are you doing the Harry Potter thing where you're grabbing like fresh 12-year-olds, or are you saying, oh, I think that I want them to be more like, 16 or something?
Nobody just clip the part where he talked about grabbing fresh 12-year-olds. I'm just asking the audience not to do that.
I'm sorry, it was a Freudian slip.
Okay. So this is another one of my big points, but it makes sense to talk about here too.
Hmm.
Yes, I think I've said this before. Animation is a little different. In
Hmm.
animation, you could keep them at 13 and it would work. I think personally, if I'm the showrunner or director of this movie or show, I would age them up to 15 or 16. I would make them freshmen in high school. To me, that just makes it a little more believable. And if you're doing live action, then I think you have to do that. Because
Hmm.
I just think you can find those really talented 13, 14-year-old actors. They exist, but it's much harder. And I think for audiences watching it, it just, to me, is more believable and interesting to see young adults than like children doing all this. Now, I feel like that maybe is sacrilege to Animorphs fans, some of them, because obviously the books, they're just so fucking young in the books. Like, you don't think
Hmm.
about it because it's written for 13-year-olds and you're like, yeah, of course they're 13. But yeah, in live action, 100% I'd age them up. Animation, I could kind of go either way.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think for live action, I would be aging them up. Um, Whereas in animation, I might try to keep it a little more true to the books. Although in the books, they do age with time. So you
Hmm.
can say like, oh, maybe they're just like 13 the whole time, or maybe they age every season of the show, or maybe fuck it, there's a part in the books where they are like 15, so let's make them 15 or whatever. Um, and that
Yeah.
all kind of does work. Like you have some leeway on that, because of the way that time passes in cartoons where you can just make
Hmm.
it not do that, if you want.
I
Um,
Yeah.
what I In live action though, I think they do need to be older, and it's not just that. There's this disconnect with them being so young and everything. I think also it's because of the strength that you get out of live action, especially in like a TV show format. You're sacrificing this ability to do the crazy, like they're always turning into animals. There's Hork-Bajir and Andalites going crazy, and Visser 3 morphs into a thing every episode. That's way harder to do. So why do you do live action? And the answer is because you can connect more with the actors when they're doing their more grounded drama, right? Like, oh,
Hmm.
what's going on with Tom? Oh, there's something happening at the school, right? I need to think about my relationship with Melissa. Let's bring Juan and Terry into this. Um, Like, you get more of a connection because you get the actual actor's performance here that you get to look at. Um, and I think that those stories are gonna be I'm gonna be far more interested in the social relationships of somebody in high school who is closer to being a real human being,
Yeah.
than in, like, the social relationships of somebody who is, like, 12, where I'm gonna be like, "Okay, but, like, you aren't you don't your brain isn't at a point where I believe that." You know what I mean? Like, your friendships aren't as
Yes.
complicated. You're just weird and fucked up at that
Yes.
point in time.
Like,
So, like,
yeah.
what story am I
Yeah.
even telling?
The high school couple, I can go, "Oh, I'm rooting for those 2 crazy
Yeah.
kids." Like, there are, high school romances do sometimes there are married couples who met in high school or whatever, it
Yeah.
exists. Nobody fucking met in middle school and got married.
Yeah.
I'm not like, "Oh, like, they don't know what the fuck they're doing." I don't really fully believe that. I
Yeah,
also
like
just think there's
yeah.
a nice I like the symmetry of like, if of the show starting when they're freshmen in high school and ending around the time they're graduating or maybe like a year later feels more it's more interesting to me that they end the series as, quote
Mhm.
unquote adults versus the way it is in the books. It's like they go from 13 to 16, which just doesn't feel
Yeah.
as interesting a change in your life, you
Yeah, I
know.
think that is also reasonable if you're taking a season per year Buffy style thing, which is
Right.
not, like, crazy.
Yeah, makes sense. Pretty
Yeah, I
logical.
mean, the actors are gonna age, so
Right. Again, if you're doing live action. So back to the actors and everything. To me, tell me who else there is. And I would include Eric, by the way, in that unknown casting because he's supposed to be their age.
mhm. So, obviously, Mr. King needs to be cast if we're casting Eric.
Yeah, first and foremost, Mr. King.
First and foremost. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, listen, I guess you need a Visser 3. If you're doing live action, Visser 3 should be in human morph a lot. As
Hmm.
opposed to in the books where he just doesn't have one. If you're doing animation, you don't need to do that. He can be an Andalite all the time.
Hmm.
But if you're doing live action, I think you need a Eugene Lipinski type. I think Visser 1 should play a much larger role than she
Hmm.
does, so you need that. Um,
Hmm.
I want to see more human controllers than there are in the book. So, like, not just like Tom, who I guess is also kind of a kid, and Chapman, and maybe Taylor can come in, and maybe gym teacher
Mm.
controller lady can come in, but like, it doesn't have to be Like, I want that type of thing. I want there to be like 3 or 4 other controllers who are important, like a Mr. Tidwell
Mm.
type or something.
Mm. And remember, even if we're doing live action, we have mocap now. Like Visser 3
Hmm.
could still be in morph all the time and it still matters who's playing him.
Right, that's true, that's true. I guess you need all the parents too, or you don't need them, but they do
Yeah,
exist.
but I don't at that point it's like if you start casting them as recognizable people, like now you got to include them
Mhm.
more and it just becomes a whole messy thing. I'm thinking
That's
of
true.
movies more so because I that's where I'm more thinking of for live action.
Okay, okay.
Um
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what you're doing with your movies, so
my to me the four important characters that you need to cast as adults are as you said Visser 3 and 1, Elfangor and Chapman. And again
yeah, if you're doing a movie, that's
yes,
true.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
movies. Yeah, I'm thinking
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
movies.
yeah. I'm thinking TV show because I'm just on, like, how many, but, like, yeah, you do need Elfangor as a mocap type thing, because like, they have faces, they shouldn't all look like a fuzzy suit, they should Visser 3 and Axe and Elfangor should look distinct, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. And I didn't really come up with names for all of these. Visser 3, I think first choice is just give it to Eugene Lipinski again. Cuz you can to some extent
Yeah.
Visser 1 less so because she has to be of a certain age for Marco, but like Visser 3 and Elfangor
Mhm.
and Chapman can kind of be like any race, any age. You can kind of
Yeah.
go nuts with it.
Yeah, and some of these people like Visser 1 are less important for movies because I feel like you don't unless
We'll
you're doing a
see.
certain type of movies, you're not necessarily doing Visser 1 in the movies.
We'll talk about that. That's
Yeah, we will
interesting.
talk about that. I mean, that's kinda why I was, like, on the TV show because I was like, "On the TV show, we gotta cast everyone. On the movies, I don't
I
know who
don't
we
know.
gotta cast."
Well, we'll see. We'll get. But the name I came right into my head that made sense to me for Visser 3 was Hugo Weaving.
Hmm. I mean, that's not wrong.
Maybe it's a little too on the nose because it feels like you could just
But
play it like Agent Smith. But to be
but
honest, he could also play Elfangor, I think.
he could. I kind of like Visser 3 better. Here's the thing, on the nose is not wrong for Visser 3. Like, right? Like,
Mhm.
if there's one character who should just be so fucking on the nose that you're like, are you serious? Really? It should be Visser 3.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now for Visser 1, I don't know, maybe this is offensive?
Uh-oh.
I did just kind of try to think of like who's a notable Hispanic actor, actress, right? Because it has to be.
Mhm.
So I was like, Salma Hayek of the Faculty fame, or perhaps Penelope Cruz. I don't really know who else you get if you're looking for a big name.
I mean, listen, in my head, I do imagine Visser 1 as, like, extremely over the top telenovela style lady, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I would have to hear other. I did not really think of anyone special for Chapman or Elfangor specifically. Could kind of just be. I don't know. I don't know how you go for because Chapman is tough too because you could kind of cast him more comedically.
Mhm.
Maybe it's Bill Hader. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I guess that also depends on, because if you're in a movie, I don't think that there's anything wrong with making Chapman comic relief for the movie. I think that could be a pretty good idea. In the TV show, you have to worry about, like, what am I doing with my Yerk characters, and do I want Chapman? Because if Chapman's my comic relief on Yerk characters, then, like, do I have non-comic relief Yerks? I feel like maybe I want those.
yeah, you probably do. Another thing, I mean, we're focusing on live action, but I think any of these could also work for a voice cast for animation as well. I think, that's
Sure.
another, you could still cast celebrities for the voices too.
Hmm.
Hugo Weaving's voice is just as important and interesting as his face. So I would still like say the same names. And obviously, if it's animation, when it comes to the kids, it could be like fucking, Tara Strong is Rachel or whatever.
I think
you
I'm
know,
more on Hugo Weaving as a voice for Elfangor than as
mm,
an act like mocap
mm.
actor for
Well, I'm thinking of
Elfangor.
like Elrond, like he's
Right.
kind of got
I
that
That's
presence.
kind of what I was thinking too, but I was like, one of the things about Elrond is that he's like kind of fucking scary. Right?
Right.
Like,
Well,
because when you look at his
yeah.
face, he looks scary.
I was gonna
Um,
say Elfangor could be kind of scary too, but I guess he's supposed to be very like warm and loving in the beginning.
Yeah, like you could make him scary, but like I think there is supposed to. I don't know. Well, I shouldn't say they're supposed to because you can do whatever you want, right? Like
Sure
that's the
can.
point of an adaptation is that you don't have to follow the books exactly. Um,
Mm.
but I think Elfangor works better if you're like the fear of the situation comes from the fact that there's this fucking alien thing crash landing, and you're like, holy shit, oh my god, that's scary. But then Elfangor very specifically kind of like he comes out and you're like, "Oh, okay, this guy's cool. I don't have to worry about there's other guys I have to worry about, not this guy." And I do prefer that. Although you could make him kind of scary too and it would be fine.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It also is different. Like, does he just show up in the beginning of if you're doing a movie? He's only there for like 20 minutes. Versus, are you gonna eventually do the Andalite Chronicles or something? There's different
Right.
requirements for those ideas. Um, yeah, okay. My next big picture question is,
Mhm.
what time period do you set the show in?
Mhm.
Do you keep it to the
Okay.
90s or do you update it for whatever modern time the movie is released or show?
Yeah. So as far as movies, I don't necessarily think you have. I think you can do generic. You don't have to think about it, to be honest. Or maybe you do, but it depends on the movie very much. So for the TV show, for me, Animorphs. Here's the thing. For me, Animorphs is very 90s. It'll always be very 90s. I don't know that it's necessarily correct a show for the show to stay 90s. And I think there are some very interesting things you can do with a show if it's not 90s because I think that just like the existence of the internet and cell phones as well, rather than like locking out certain plots. I think that that actually opens up a lot of potential new plots you can do. Um but for me personally, I'm gonna miss it not being extremely 90s, right? If we're talking about my ideal show, I want it to be like way too 90s. And so like especially when I imagine my ideal show, like an animated show that is much more true to the books, I want that show to be really fucking 90s. Um in a live action show where specifically saying like, "Oh, let's diverge from the books a lot." Now I'm a lot more interested in like, okay, we're trying to do more of these like grounded interpersonal plots and less of these high concept plots. Yeah, maybe you do open it up to a modern day adaptation because that lets you do much more interesting like you know in the books we have book 16 where they have the forums that they stumble upon, and there is a lot of room to do like weird how does social media interact with this invasion
Now it's
plot lines.
TikTok. Now it's
Yeah,
Yerk
right.
TikToks.
Like honestly
I'm on
there's a lot of room
Yerktalk.
to like explore there and do plots there um that would
Discord
open
instead
up.
of AIM. Yeah, we're pretty much on the same page here. I think as for me as well, if we're doing an animated show, I would stick to the 90s, I think.
Mhm.
For one thing, this has been pointed out before, there's a lot of issues with the Yerk takeover where if people had phone cameras on them all the time, like it creates a lot of issues, you know?
Mhm.
Or even just for like the kids morphing, like it's a lot harder for them to hide and that kind of thing. Better to just like go lower tech and not have to ask some of those questions.
Mhm. I
And
mean,
I
but again, that's only true if you're sticking to sort of the plots you already have. If you are saying, "I'm gonna go
Yeah.
wild and do things that aren't the books at all."
Well, that's what I think, and maybe this is getting it's just more of like my visions of
Mhm,
this is I feel like if you're doing a TV show, to me it makes sense to make that more faithful to the books. If you're
mhm,
doing movies, I think you have to make a lot more concessions. And I think it's also if it's live action, it's much harder to do a period piece that's like ups your even to the 90s, that's still upping your budget and making it annoying, and you have to think about, wait, did they have this? Did they have that? Does he wear this kind of jacket or not? All that kind of shit. It just makes sense to me if you're doing movies to just make it modern day because it's not as
mhm.
big of an issue. Also because
Yeah.
movies would be more condensed, so stuff like cell phones is not as big a deal because presumably, at least the way I'm envisioning it, it wouldn't be lasting, 5 or 6 years timeline because you don't have enough movies for that. But we can talk about that when we get more into the specifics.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of that. I'm mostly thinking about this for a TV show because again, this comes down to like how many movies are you gonna have, and like they're all gonna
Mhm.
be self-contained. So you do have this thing where you're like, okay, if I introduce TikTok or whatever, and if I've introduced like everybody every time they go on Rachel goes on a bear rampage, it's all over the internet now that there was a bear rampage in this town, right? Um, so, like, Andalite bandits or no, that changes kind of everything, and you have to think about that every episode going forward. So,
Mhm.
like, fundamentally, you have to do something different. Whereas in the movie, it's like, man, if you show something like this, it's like it doesn't matter, man, because like that's if it doesn't affect this very plot we're doing right now, then it doesn't matter unless we're trying to do a Marvel Cinematic Universe, do 20 movies and they're all like continuity ish. And
Mhm.
I don't know that I want to do that. In fact, I do know that I don't want to do that.
Oh,
Um,
wow. You know things.
so, but like that does change things a lot. So it doesn't matter as much in the movies what you're doing, and
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have time
Mhm.
for them to be like, oh, doing mall stuff and making '90s jokes and references. You only have a couple scenes of that in a single movie, whereas in the show you've got to be doing that like every episode. So like it matters, right?
I don't know, I'm kinda picturing it just as mall rats, but they just morph sometimes.
Well, that can be one of your possible wish
Okay.
list movies.
So, okay, now before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, there's some things. My other like big picture question was what kind of major big changes or removals would you make to the overall story? Some of these things I think I'm going to save for when we talk about the actual specifics of the movies or the TV shows. But I do have a couple that I feel like, regardless of medium, I think are changes I would make.
Okay, I didn't really think about that in like a are there any that are universal? I feel like I have a
Hmm.
lot of takes on this for any individual medium. They might
Okay.
overlap, but I'm interested to hear what yours are.
Well, here's my two. Actually, I don't even know if one of them's not even that really a departure. It's just more of a tweak. But the
Hmm.
first one that I think is one of the one of the positive things that the show did that I think, whether you're doing a movie, TV show, live action, animation, I think you just should do this. I would do this
Hmm.
if I were running it. Is just make morphing less complicated. It shouldn't take 2 minutes, especially if it's a TV show. We don't need to be watching a scene of 2 minutes of morphing 5 times an episode every episode.
Hmm.
They can just morph clothes. Like, I think we
Hmm.
don't need to be watching them hide their shoes and everything. It's just not necessary. Nor do we want to see teenagers in leotards.
Hmm.
um, put that on the record, folks. Like, maybe if you want kind of a compromise, maybe it can, if you're doing a show, maybe it sort of starts that way, but they quickly get better at it and they can do it faster, so that you can have, at least in the beginning, you get to see more of the transformation in a fun way that's a little slower and cooler. But when you're doing this all the time, just fucking cut out a lot of that schmutz, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
like in book one, we have the funny scene where Tobias is like naked in Jake's room, and he's like, Jake, you gotta, I don't know, do you have any clothes for me?" Like, you can still do a scene like that and be like, haha, oops. But then instead of being like, "Oh, we figured out how to morph leotards, but not shoes," it's like, okay, Cassie knows how to morph clothes. You get on it.
Mhm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in the past, I have made statements about that I would change the technology of the Escafil device to be magic instead.
Hmm.
I don't in the right now. I'm not feeling that as much. I think I would probably still stick to it being sci-fi tech, but maybe it would be slightly more mystical or less explained or something. I don't know. But that's I'm not gonna. We don't need to get into that right now. But I thought I should mention it
No,
since I've said
I
it
think that
before.
that's reasonable. So far, I'm kind of on the same page with you on all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm 100% the Escafil should be technology, but it wouldn't. Again, one of the advantages of a visual medium is that I'm far more interested in whether things look cool than the explanations. Whereas when I'm reading it, I'm like, tell me how it works using your words that I'm reading. So you can just cut out a lot of the explanations and, instead of saying like, "Oh, I got to explain why you can do this but not that." Um, in the show you can just be like, "You can't do that. You can do this. Why? I'm not going to explain why, which will
Yeah.
only lead to further questions, and you'll eventually just say, "Listen, it just doesn't make sense. Stop explaining it." It's not explained. That's how it works. Okay, Andalite tech. Don't worry about it. We're not doing that. You're looking at the cool thing that's happening on screen. It looks cool. Aren't you happy? Kind of thing.
It's the looper. It's time travel. Who gives a fuck how it works? Just watch the movie.
Mhm.
Yeah. My other big picture thing that's a little more complicated, that I think might change from movie or show depending on how you feel. But I think you gotta keep, even though it might not make as much sense, I do think you have to keep. It's gotta begin, whatever you're doing, the same way the gunslinger ran across the desert and the man in black chased him, or whatever that is.
Mhm.
The first line of any of the Animorphs thing has to be "My name is Jake." And
Mhm.
I think you have to some extent, keep the conceit of the point of view narration. It is trickier because we'll get to it when we talk about the show more in depth, but like, how do you keep to a Marco episode and a Rachel episode? I don't know how I would handle that. It's even more complicated for the movies because you probably have fewer movies, so you want to give the kids equal time. Maybe they're just all Jake just for consistency. I don't know. But I also would make it so that I would explicitly show the kids writing everything down in a journal or something. I want to keep the conceit that they are actually like for future records in case they die or something. They're like keeping a record of it, but they're not being published in bookstores. I'm taking this idea and making it canonized in a way
Mm,
that, as you know, sometimes irked me in the books that it didn't make sense. I want to kind of make it make sense. That's what I would do.
interesting. Yeah, that's interesting because I in my head when I'm thinking about this adaptation, one of the things that I immediately think is the advantage of adapting this is that I can do things differently. And one of the things that I would do differently is probably throw away the point of view narration.
Mm.
Right. I'm saying like, fuck it. Like I'm not doing that. Right. I can have like character centric episodes the way that you would, but I'm just not keeping point of view because like as fun as it is, I think that when you're not actively like in their head reading their thoughts and you're just watching it, I think it causes more problems than it solves. On the other hand, you make a strong point with the opening having to be "My name is Jake." And I
Mhm.
don't know what to do about that in a TV show. Like in a movie, you can just open with that, have Jake be the central character, and then not really worry about the fact that also everybody else is important and that you move away from that. But in a TV show, that is a weird way to start if you're not going to continue it. I don't really know how to
Yeah.
square that circle unless I'm doing what you're doing, but I don't know. I don't want to keep the I don't want to keep the point of view narration at all.
I do kind of want to have my cake and eat it too on this one cuz
Mhm.
I agree with you structurally. I don't want to keep that POV narration. I don't really want it throughout the episode necessarily.
Mhm.
But it does just seem to me like a core part of the Animorphs that you're kind of losing something if you don't include it a little bit. And maybe you just make it so maybe Jake is just the scribe and he's just the guy who writes everything down. And maybe it's
Mhm.
not every episode. Maybe like the season finale and the premiere or whatever, or in the movies case, would be all the movies maybe. You always get the "My name is Jake," and maybe like sometimes in the beginning and end, you hear a little bit of a narration pop up, but it doesn't need to be like all the time constant. In the long run, you're probably right that it's complicated and it's maybe better to just axe it. No pun intended.
I mean, here's the thing though, as much as I want to be like axing the POV narration and structure, um
Was that pun
there
intended or no?
maybe it is.
Okay.
Um I do I think that there are some times where it would be well served, especially with Tobias and Axe, because they have such an outsider perspective. Just saying like, "Oh, one episode this season is gonna be fully like Hawk
Oh yeah.
perspective," or
Yeah.
something like that. And, maybe that does open the door for something like, "Listen, every season of the show, you get one episode that is fully one character's perspective." Like I
Mm.
open on My Name is Jake. This is Jake's perspective of this, and then we
Mm.
kind of bleed into, it's not anybody's person. Oh, wait, except it's time for Marco's mom. Well, this episode is just Marco's perspective. And so we get a My Name is Marco. Maybe you can do something like that
Mm. When you
if
if
you're
you hear
trying
the
to,
"My name is," that's when you're locked in as a viewer. You're like, "Oh, this is a
yeah,
good one."
this is a plot relevant, character development relevant. This is all about Marco. This is the Marco app.
It does feel to me like almost inevitable that you it would fade away.
Hmm.
Like it's a device that you would start to use and it would make less sense as
Yeah.
things went on, which maybe is okay. Like maybe you just do it in the first episode and you can kind of pay some lip service to it once in a while. Like I said, some kids writing something down on their computer at night, but you don't have to do it all the time. It could just be kind of
Yeah.
inconsistent.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, um, I don't. Rachel is also just not that well served in the books because, like, if I look at like the first chunk of books, like you do end up saying like whatever the opening storyline can just be. That's the obvious. My name is Jake, right? there's an obvious "My name is Marco." It's where whatever episode you introduce his mom. There's an obvious "My name is Axe." It's like the first time we see, and it probably should be like not after they get him, but like the first time you see him try to contact home and like actually come to terms with being part of the group as opposed to just being like, I'm an outsider. Um, there should probably be either Tobias is either the one Hawk centric episode or the episode where he gets his being a boy back. Cassie, you can do like an Aftran style storyline, and that's like the Cassie, My Name is Cassie. Rachel, where's My Name is Rachel? Like the
The
earliest time I see a book where I'm just
separation,
like, this has to be a Rachel is,
the
yeah, I guess.
reaction.
I guess it could be. I was gonna say the earliest time I see it is the solution, the end of the David arc, but like,
Oh,
is that what you want? I don't know, because that feels
hmm.
like now Rachel's story is also David's story. Maybe it's the
Hmm.
separation. Maybe you're right. Maybe you hit it
Mhm.
on the head.
Mhm. Yeah. At any rate, there's definitely, yeah, you can play with that. It's
Hmm.
complicated, but yeah, that's I don't know. We said our thoughts pretty good. All right. Why don't we kind of transition into more specifics? I think I want to start by talking about movies,
Hmm.
also because I think we'll agree on this. To me, the TV show, if I had my preference, that is the better way to go.
Hmm.
And I have more detailed thoughts about how that would go.
Okay.
But I'm curious for you. What are your visions of the movies? Uh, do you have anyone in mind for directors? I'm not even going to get into writers or anything like that because that's
Hmm.
who knows. But directors and like how I think the biggest question is how many movies do you do?
Yeah. So, okay. So I think how many movies do you do is the first way to go about it, because I was kind of looking at this like what I what I don't really want is to do a massive cinematic universe. I think had you asked me in like 2010 what my favorite Animorphs movie adaptation would be, and I would have been like, hell yeah, I'm on this. Let's do it. Let's just do, we'll do one movie that's like the invasion, and then we'll just keep going. We'll show you more, like the big plots can all get
Kevin
their own movie.
Feige is on stage at Comic-Con and you're
Yeah,
seeing the big tent pole, The Andalite Chronicles. Yeah, the crowd
right.
goes fucking nuts.
Yeah, like the invasion movie. Oh, let's do the movie where they get Axe and Axe is here now. Let's do an
Yeah.
Ellimist movie where Tobias is a boy. Let's do a fucking Hork-Bajir and Tobias finds out about his dad. The Andalite Chronicles. Marco's mom. They can all have their own movies, type of shit. And I'm just really like looking at that now. I'm just like, yeah, I really feel like that would just they would start to get samey. It would burn out. It would lose. Like it wouldn't by the end of it, I'd be like, I'm sick of Animorphs, and I don't want to be sick of Animorphs. I'd rather
It's
have like
also
one good movie that I really like.
like, let's face it, it's also impossible. Like
Yeah,
there's no universe ever where they would do that many movies of Animorphs. So it's almost not even
yeah,
pie in the sky worth thinking
w-
of to me.
yeah. I mean, the universe where they do it is where it starts off with like the invasion, and everybody somehow loves it. It's a hit. It goes
But even
crazy.
but
Right?
even then, like they're not making 60 movies.
Yeah,
It's just crazy.
yeah.
or
I mean,
even
they're
or
not making
even
60, but
30 movies, like even if you cut out like have all the filler, like 20 movies, even that is insane.
mhm.
Um to
I guess.
me, yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
go ahead. No, no,
Well,
no.
I was gonna say, I guess when I'm looking at movies, the conclusion I kind of come to on it is I don't know that I want more than one movie, and that movie could be a lot of different
Wow,
things. But
interesting.
like if I say like, okay, let's say we started with the invasion, right? Um, then like what is your satisfactory trilogy? Right? Like how do I for example, right? Like how do I put Animorphs into a trilogy? And like
I'll tell you.
I don't know how I get from the invasion to the end game
I
in a
know
way
how.
that feels natural. That doesn't feel like I just skipped years worth of content to me. And so I'm kind of
Well,
just
you
sitting here
will.
like, if it's not going to be just the invasion, but there are some real downsides to doing that and doing nothing else, then I almost would rather have. a self-contained story from the Animorphs universe, like a Chronicles adaptation on its own, and then
Right.
not do regular Animorphs.
But again, and I mean, what we're just making
Sure.
shit up. So it's like, your vision can be whatever you want it to be.
Mhm.
But in my brain of trying to pitch this, like, no one's ever just making the Hork-Bajir Chronicles. It's just not in the realm of possibility. Like, you're either doing Animorphs or all of it or none of it. I don't think there's a world where someone just makes a standalone Chronicles adaptation as a movie. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's probably true, but, like, if we're talking about what do you actually want,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that is kind of what I want. Like, I think I might prefer a standalone Chronicles to, like, a trilogy of Animorphs movies that just feels somehow incomplete or whatever, or a cinematic universe that by the end gets stale and bad, you know? If I
Hmm.
can have whatever I want.
Yeah, well, I think that my like pie in the sky thing is like I'm thinking of other film series that are
Mhm.
long running, and you basically like you have Harry Potter has 8, Mission Impossible will have 8. To me, that's like maybe the kind of like 6 to 8 is
Hmm.
like outer limits. But I didn't really think about how you would spread things across that necessarily. I do
Yeah.
think. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I feel like at that point, I would rather have a TV show,
Yeah, well, I
but
mean, the advantage of the movies is again live action and huge budgets and getting to see the stuff
mhm.
look cool. Um, I think if you are doing movies, you just have to basically you're by necessity you're just gutting a lot of the story.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
For me, I think the Elemist and Krayak are gone. They're just gone. You do not. There's not time to have that fucking shit in a series of movies, unless you're doing like a dozen or maybe. But
Mhm,
that's what I would do is like they're gone. Almost every subplot is gone. Eric and the Chi are gone. We don't have
mhm,
time for more kids. We have 6 that need to be developed. That's gone.
mhm.
Um, Helmicrons still in.
Helmicron's movie, yeah, I mean, this is my pie in the sky. They just do an adaptation of the Helmicrons, no
Just
human
the journey,
characters.
right? Just the journey or the voyage, whatever
Oh,
no, it's the
yeah, oh, I
journey.
was actually thinking maybe like the Helmicron Chronicles.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh,
Just Helmicrons, no
I
human characters, only
yeah.
Helmicrons.
Yeah. Well, and the whatever the other characters were called in our buddy Flume's fan fiction.
Right, yeah, no, because once you're saying no human characters, now you're going to all of that crazy shit.
So
Why
I
not?
do I do agree the two approaches to me that make sense is one, you just do the invasion and that's just a movie
Mhm,
by itself,
mhm,
which I think you could do basically and have it wrap up if you wanted to and it would be fine. Uh, I do have a vision for a trilogy approach.
okay. So,
And yeah,
so yeah, before you get on that, I guess I'll just
mhm,
talk about the invasion because
yeah,
the trilogy will probably fix some of the problems that I would have with just doing the invasion, right?
mm,
Um so cuz here's the thing. I feel like since I just don't see a world in which I get my multiple Animorphs movies and I don't just kind of fall off and say what are we doing? Uh, like I you know, it I just 6, 7, 8 movies, even at that point, it's gonna I don't know the coherent way to, like, fit the story is so all over the place, right? How do I get to the ending in a way that feels like a story and not
yeah. That's why I agree.
anyway.
I think you either do 3 movies or a whole TV show. I think in between is
Mhm.
like uncanny valley of
Yeah.
amount of content.
Yeah, so for me, I'm saying either just the invasion
Yeah,
like one movie from the canon that is not the kids. Right. If
right.
you're doing the kids, you're doing the invasion for me. Um here is the problem with the invasion that you end up with. If you don't change the ending of the invasion, um this is a downer ending.
Oh, you would change it. They would win at the end. I think
But like how would
100%.
they win?
They take out the Yerk pool, the ship gets blown up, it's Independence Day, they all die. Like, you just do that. To me,
But,
that's an
like,
easy
I
one.
don't that sounds bad
Because you're
to me.
thinking too much. I mean, look, it's your vision, but you're
Mhm.
thinking of it as, a satisfying adaptation of Animorphs as it exists in the books. I'm at least where I'm coming from is a slightly more like realistic. If you're
Mhm.
turning this into a standalone movie or whatever it is, you have to make a lot of these sacrifices. And to me, like the faculty or something, like well, that's what we
Mhm.
said when we watched the faculty. The faculty basically is like, what if the Animorphs just was a 2 hour movie and they won at the end? And I think you could do that. And yeah, of course, you're losing a lot of the nuance and everything, obviously, but I think that would work well enough. I'm going to go further into a trilogy, but I think for the first movie, you could do it okay.
Yeah, see, for me that feels better if it's not Animorphs. If it's like, "Oh, this is like Animorphs, but they won." Like, for me, one of the things that I would want to keep about Animorphs is some of those more darker elements. Like when I see the Yerk pool, I want it to feel overwhelming. Like, how are we even going to beat this? I want that. I
You
don't
could
want
do
you to
that.
go in there and say, like, how is it even possible to beat this? Oh, well, they just do. They blow it up. It doesn't feel that overwhelming anymore. The idea that they get out of it and they say, we
Well,
won today because we survived and maybe got one or two people out, but we didn't really make a dent in them and Tobias got trapped. Like, to me, that's so much in the DNA of Animorphs that it has this, you get to the ending of the series and you are like, even though you win, it kind of feels bad.
but I
Um,
mean, Will, I would say to you,
mhm.
does the Death Star not feel foreboding and like there's no way to defeat it and then it's blown up an hour later? I mean, it's like movies have done this.
I guess, but like, I don't know. I Listen, K.A. Applegate had that whole thing that she said where she's like, in real life, stories don't end with heroes going like, yeah, we did it, we beat it, and everybody's cheering. In real
Well,
life,
you
there's
kill one of
always,
them. You kill one of the kids. There you go. It's not
yeah, I guess you could do
well.
it.
Well, this is my question to you. If the studio comes to you, you're in
Mhm.
charge and says like, "Look, we only can make one movie. We're just not giving you
Mhm.
more." Is your answer just, "Well, we can't do it," or like, what would you do?
I mean, this is the problem is that like a part of me wants to say I want a downer ending, but like I don't know that that's correct.
But I don't
You
think,
know what I
yeah, I don't
mean?
because I don't think that's correct either. Like it can be complicated and there can be like tragedy that happens, but I think they gotta win the fight
Mhm.
against the Yerks ultimately.
Yeah, see, I mean, to me, the Yerk, if a set of six kids who can only turn into animals can just knock out the Yerk pool immediately, that to me doesn't feel like the Yerks were ever a huge threat. Because, like, at the
Well,
very
yeah, I
least, the
mean,
Death Star is coming off the back of they're already like Luke does not come as some backwoods
mm,
farm kid and blow up the Death Star, right? There is a pre-existing order of Jedi. He's working with the pre-existing Rebel Alliance. They had plans. Like, there is this whole background. These kids are operating off of almost nothing. I if I
well,
were gonna make it an uplifting ending, I would have it be something along the lines of like it ends by them free they do free Tom, right? Like maybe
mm,
they lose Tobias to being trapped, but they free Tom, right? And so that's a victory. Like the emotional core for these characters is resolved, even though the Yerk threat is still here. And maybe you have something about contacting the Andalite fleet, and they manage to do that. And so it ends on this note of like, there is hope. We're gonna keep fighting, but there is hope, or something like that. And we don't dash your hopes by saying they're going to genocide you yet. That's if you get sequels, which I don't know that I want. I feel like maybe you do something like that for it.
I would almost do the opposite and say they
Mm,
win the Yerks, but they lose Tom or something like
hmm.
that, or they, like to me that's it's more. I don't know. It just in my head makes more sense to win the war, but you sacrifices to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's hard to say.
I mean,
But
I think I understand your issues, but I do think a lot of it comes from knowing the books so well, which isn't your fault. You know them very well. um,
yeah, but
like I think you could say the same thing still about Star Wars. Like, oh, so
mhm.
he is still some fucking kid, and like 3 days later he blows up the Death Star. Like, yeah, he has the Force, but they have animal morphs. It's like kind of equivalent.
Yeah, but I mean, he does it with a ship from this. He does it with training, whatever.
Give him a
I
ship.
guess,
They
I
steal a
guess.
bug fighter.
Well, but I guess my point is
Elfangor's
that, like,
alive. He comes back and helps. You can change stuff. You can do stuff.
sure. But like, I guess this is kind of my point, is that you're saying, because I know the books so well, I'm going along with them, and that's like, for me, like, that's kind of the point of the
Yeah, yeah,
adaptation,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is that it's like, I want to change the parts of the books that need to be changed for a good adaptation, but I want to keep the core parts that I really like. So I don't think that it's necessarily a negative thing that I'm constrained by the books, so long as those are the parts that I really like. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
As
yeah,
long
yeah.
as I'm willing to change some things about it. I think that that's kind of what you should be doing for an adaptation, because if I'm just going to change, like, those parts, like, if I change the parts that to me are like the texture, the emotional texture of the series to me, then at that point I'm saying, like, yeah, why not just make a movie about kids who fight brain slugs like The Faculty? Like, why does it have to be Animorphs? Like, I don't,
Because they turn into
it, do-
animals.
it doesn't feel like Animorphs to me, so it can just be anything. It doesn't have to be an
Mm.
adaptation at that point.
Yeah, I guess to me, I'm seeing the. I think it would just be a different
Hmm.
version of it, but the same way we said about the TV show, there would be you could instill enough of the DNA. Here's the
Yeah.
thing. I'm arguing for this one movie approach, and it's not even
Yeah.
my approach.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, here's the other thing, is that
It's not what I would
fundamentally
want.
we're gonna butt heads on a couple points, because, like I said, like, my adaptation vision is based on what I consider to be the, like, important texture of the series to me and my experience. What you latch onto and like about the series is not necessarily the same thing. So you might say, like, no, you could do it and it's fine for you, but that's not my personal ideal adaptation. Like, it's just going to be different, right?
You'd be straight to Reddit. This wasn't the way it was supposed to be. You know,
Well, yes, except that I don't use Reddit.
you would sign up though for this.
I would just whine to random people on the street.
My thoughts must be heard.
I'd go to the Wawa and buy a soda, and I'd be like, excuse me, I must talk to you about how I didn't like the new Animorphs movie.
Listen,
Bother everyone.
let me tell you, and I want to see what you think about it. This is my broad vision for a trilogy of
Yes,
Animorphs
solve
movies.
this problem with a trilogy for me.
So for me, like again, and I don't know, you may still be, you'll probably bristle at it still because like I said,
Mhm.
you have to cut, you have to cut a
Of
million
course.
things. You have to.
Yeah, of
It's
course you
not
do.
going to be
Yeah.
exactly the same. Yeah, it's not one to one. For me, the first movie basically is still the invasion. I
Hmm.
think you pretty much follow it to a T. That is movie one. Uh, Here is my movie two, and I really just tried to distill it to like what are the key elements that you can take from the books that still make for a satisfying narrative that makes sense in three movies. And movie two is The Empire Strikes Back, of course. This is Axe shows up, so I think you kind of do a little bit of the message because you have to have
Hmm.
Axe in there. So I think he's kind of the poster of the movie is Axe.
So you're doing no axe in movie one, axe
No
shows up
Axe
for movie
movie
two.
one.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I'm not opposed to adding axe to the invasion. If
Yeah,
I'm doing a
sure.
one movie thing, I would
Sure.
be sad to miss axe. So.
Yeah. I agree with that. And you could have
Mhm.
him, he could help with the tech stuff, and that could maybe
Sure.
solve some of your issues a little bit. So Axe is in the movie. I think the crux of it, the emotional crux, and I think this kind of becomes even more of the focal point for the movies than it was in the books, although it still was pretty big in the books, is Marco's mom as Visser 1.
Hmm.
And I think just like you find out, it's going to be all about Star Wars this episode, the Vader I am your father twist, like you find out in the third act that it's his mom, and that's like that you have the downer ending and the cliffhanger. You basically just steal Empire is my
Hmm.
vision. And the other thing, so it's like a combined message slash predator, I guess, is where you find out.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And then the third thing that I throw in there, and maybe I didn't like write a script or anything, so
Right.
maybe
Right.
this is complicated, but I think the other setup that you have to put into the mix. I mean, there's a lot of still like also complex stuff about characters and Tobias as a hawk, and there's other shit you'd have to fit in. But in terms of the like big plot, I think you work in a little bit of Freed Hork-Bajir. there you seed the idea
Mhm.
of Hork-Bajir escaping, or like maybe a subplot, or maybe even a bigger plot of the movie amidst everything, is somehow you also mix in some of the controllers. Maybe you do Yerk resistance, but I like the idea of it being Hork-Bajir
Mhm.
somewhere in there.
Okay, so,
I don't know if
here's
I don't know if maybe I should just give you my third movies so that you can see the whole picture before, or unless you have something you think.
I'll say some things about this, and then we can move on because I think some
Yeah.
of them are gonna be that I wanna see payoffs in the 3rd movie, and we'll see what you do. But, okay.
I didn't, to be
So
honest, it's not that extensive, so
here is, here's one thing that I 100% agree with you. If you're gonna do a second story in Animorphs post the invasion, like, if you're gonna do the invasion as a story, and you're gonna do a second story, it has to be Marco's mom, right? Because Marco's mom is just so much like an emotional crux of the series. Like,
yeah.
this is, outside of Jake and Tom, like, this is what you're really
Mhm.
hanging on to here. Um,
Maybe you even
and
cut
you just
Tom, to be honest,
you
but
could. I like him for the invasion as a storyline. I think that
yeah.
he helps
Yeah,
he
you're right,
helps
you're right.
ground Jake's story
Maybe
and
you like you said, maybe you wrap him up in the first movie though. But yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's reasonable. Um I think that Mark the problem is that you do not have time for Marco's mom in the invasion. So if you're going to do a second story, that second story better be Marco's mom because like there is so much shit you have to get through in Animorphs, right? Like how much fucking lore and crap do you have to introduce to the audience? You don't have time to be like, "Oh, by the way, also my mom is Visser 1." Like unless his mom is Visser 3 now and you just consolidate that. But even at
Hmm.
that point, it's like, man, you don't there's 6 fucking characters on top of all of the high concept sci-fi shit. You just don't have time. So I 100% think you're right. Movie 2 has to be Marco's mom. It just has to be.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing acts in movie 1, then you got to do them in movie 2. Um Marco's mom introduces a lot of Yerk politics, like just by her nature, like the existence of Visser 1 clashes with Visser 3, which I think to me naturally opens the door to Yerk resistance movement because it lets you start thinking about the Yerks as like individuals with motivations, right? Like even if it's just politics, as opposed to just the bad guy. And so to me, that feels more natural than Hork-Bajir, but I do love me
Hmm.
some good free Hork-Bajir. Either way, I don't know that you have time for Axe and Marco's mom and pay off a Resistance or Hork-Bajir, so that feels like, and it sounds like this is what you're setting up. It sounds like those are somehow going to segue into the end here.
Yeah, well, basically, my idea for the third movie is my vision of a trilogy
Hmm.
of this franchise is basically you do book one,
Hmm.
then you do books 5 and 6,
Hmm.
and then you do book 54.
Hmm.
And basically, you just cut to big battle. I think you get Taxons in there. I think Taxons are your ghosts in Return of the King. they're your they're your Deus Ex Machina that comes in for the big fight in the end. And that's another reason I think I want Hork-Bajir in there, because I want to see the big
Hmm.
fucking I want the Helm's Deep CGI Hork-Bajir
Yeah.
fighting animals fighting fucking shit.
Here's a question for you actually, since you're bringing up do you picture these movies as being like 2-hour Star Wars movies or like 3.5-hour Lord of the Rings movies?
I think the first movie you could easily do 2 hours, but yeah, by the way I'm describing movie two, that's got to be a 3 hour movie for sure.
Mm. You're
It's
you're
got to
kind of
be.
saying like we've got goodwill now because people
Yes,
loved the first one, so the studio
yes,
will allow us. Okay, okay.
yeah. But yeah, that's like I don't know more nitty gritty than that. I think you just do the final battle. Visser one is more involved. Like obviously she would be
Hmm.
alive. They didn't like just like step on her. And I like and the idea of the big battle. And I think you'd basically do the ending. Rachel dies. I don't know if you. I would probably just cut the open ended epilogue stuff
Hmm.
because it's just a little like much. But I don't know the specifics of how my third movie would go in terms of what's the actual plot besides just a big fight. I guess it's just book 54, kind of.
All right. I actually am thinking of some now that you're laying this out, I'm starting to think of some potential ideas here.
Okay.
Um okay. So here's some things that I really like about the end and how you could use them. So you've got one thing that I do think is really important to the end is that not just Rachel dies, but a lot of innocent people. Like,
Mhm.
I to the point where Jake is almost irredeemable in his actions, but like you also have to say like he had to. Well, like what choice did he have? I don't necessarily want to see a whole open-ended epilogue, but if we're doing Return of the King and we get to have three endings, I do kind of want to see Jake suffering from PTSD at the end. Um,
I think
you
they
know,
all are, for sure. I think
yeah,
you get
you
that
can
in there.
get Marco and Cassie morph therapy or something. Like we don't need the full scouring of the Shire, but give me three endings. Um, I I think one way that you could tie this in, because obviously you can't sacrifice the auxiliary animorphs, right? Like that's just not.
They're not I'm
Um,
sacrificing them from the script.
From the script, yeah. So if you introduce the free Hork-Bajir, maybe what you do is Jake
Mm.
uses Toby and the free Hork-Bajir, just straight up, they get annihilated. Like, he just fucking genocides the free Hork-Bajir on Earth by making them a sacrificial pawn.
Mhm. Wow.
And you're just like, what the? Because then, because you are supposed to be like, Jake, what the fuck? You are killing these kids. But on the other hand, you don't really care about the auxiliary animorphs unless you're a weirdo like me. Whereas I don't know, how can you not love Jeremy? Like, imagine, because Jeremy dies, right? He does die. Imagine that Jake sends him in there knowing he's gonna die, same as
Yeah.
Rachel.
This is
Like, this is
good.
fucked.
This is
Um,
good.
so you can tie that in. V- One of the more interesting things about Visser 1 to me is A, the politics between her and Visser 3, and B, the fact that she knows the Animorphs are human and Marco is an Animorph.
Mm.
So, what if you open movie 3 with that revelation, and instead of them working with Tom to double cross Visser 3, but actually they're double crossing Marco's
Mm.
mom, they work with her.
Mhm. That
Uh,
makes sense.
Now, the problem with this is that in the end, instead of sending Rachel to kill um Tom to kill her cousin, like, you have to totally change the way this works, or else you're sending
Yeah.
Rachel to kill Marco's mom, which isn't
Yeah.
good, or you're sending
Uh,
Marco to kill Marco's mom, which isn't thematically appropriate because it really should be Rachel who dies.
I could see, the rework being, like, Marco feels like he has to do it, but Rachel's like, I'm the one who's
Mhm,
already so far gone that I
mhm,
I will sacrifice and do that for you. I feel like you could build that
yeah.
up and make that work if you plan it.
Oh, yeah, or just, kind of soften that a little bit and just have Marco kill his mom, as part
Just
like,
soften it a little.
yeah, because he kills his
Kills his
mom
mom.
anyway. He kills his mom anyway, but you could have
Right.
Marco kill his mom earlier, and then Rachel still has to sacrifice herself somehow. Right. Marco doesn't have to sacrifice himself to kill his mom, but Rachel does, but she doesn't have the cousin link or something.
Mm.
I don't know.
But yeah, that's my broad, like, if you're gonna condense these into 3 movies, I think that's the most important parts are there that still keep the core of Animorphs intact, even though you're losing, 45 plus books.
Hmm.
And I think that if that trilogy is successful, then you would then get the same way we got the Hobbit movies, you would get the Andalite Chronicles trilogy and the Hork-Bajir Chronicles trilogy, and they would milk them for all they're worth.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, at that point, I'm starting to get unhappy because I want the Hork-Bajir Chronicles to be a 3.5 hour James Cameron Avatar movie,
Right.
which is the same thing, but it's Hork-Bajir. I do not want it to be a
They're
three-part,
gonna
nine
Hobbit
hour
it.
Hobbit movie.
Yeah.
Right. Um, Now, yeah, I mean, maybe you've talked me into this because, like, I
Mm.
was going into it thinking, like, if you're doing a trilogy, the first movie has to be the invasion, the second movie has to be Marco's mom, and the third movie has to be the ending. And my problem with that was, how the hell do you get there and have that be satisfying that you got there? But maybe you can do it. Maybe you can do it.
Yeah, see? See? I had a way. I think the biggest challenge of it is simply getting a good arc across for all 6 main
Right.
characters. Like, Marco's is easy because he's tied into his mom with the plot. I think Jake's is probably kind of easy because he's like the leader, but making sure you really get Rachel's progression across and like something for and Cassie's as well, that's tricky to do.
Hmm.
But and even
Cassie's almost
Tobias.
the hardest because with Tobias, you can just you can just link Tobias to Rachel and make him just a full-on tragedy. Like, he turns into a bird at the
Mm.
end of movie 1, and then his arc throughout is that he just retreats more and more into his birdness, and as Rachel dies in the end, he's just a fucking bird,
Yeah,
right? You can just do like, it doesn't delve very deep into Tobias, but it does like, he and Rachel can kind of, like, complement each other since neither of them will have quite as much of a focused story. Cassie, though, man, Cassie really needs some kind of I mean, I guess Cassie could still have her, like, moral center where she like, Jake and Margot and Rachel and Tobias all
mhm,
destroy themselves to some degree, and Cassie kind of comes out.
mhm.
I don't know, you have to but
Yeah,
you don't have time to do Aftran or
no.
much
But
Yerk or if you're doing Yerk Resistance, it's linked to Marco's mom, not Cassie, right?
but as you were saying that, it made me think you could kinda do the same thing with her and Jake as Tobias and Rachel, as
Mhm,
she's witnessing the tragedy of him becoming more and more kinda soulless and manipulative.
mhm.
And
So,
maybe
like
you give her more scenes with, like, the Hork-Bajir, like, maybe she's kind of
yeah.
the
You can do like a
conduit.
foil with their relationships where
Mhm,
Tobias and Rachel can like kind of become more and more dependent on each other and Tobias ends up totally obliterated because Rachel's gone.
mhm.
Cassie kind of tragically drifts away from Jake and she ends up kind of free cuz she managed to detach from him in the end. I don't know.
Here, I heard Homer over there.
Yeah, Homer's kind of going wild right now, so just don't worry about
He'll
it.
be fine. And I also
He's
think,
having a meltdown.
you with Axe, I think you make the focus of him more him v Visser 3, that he, like, wants revenge for his brother. You make that his arc.
Mhm.
It's funny, I was going into this, I wrote a lot more and thought a lot more about the TV version of this. And then we ended up talking so much about the idea of the movie trilogy, and now I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty good too."
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm on this movie trilogy in a way that I wasn't, because I was far more interested in, um, because I was just like, listen, I want my father movie. It's not gonna happen. I kind of, honestly, I would love James Cameron's Hork-Bajir Chronicles, but let's be real, it would just be Avatar again. So
Mhm.
and listen, I'm all for more avatars, but like, that's not that interesting. I was a lot more on if what if I just got an Andalite Chronicles adaptation or an Andalite Chronicles trilogy? And I was like, maybe I'm happier with this than an Animorphs
This is your
book.
window into that. This is how you get that. You start with this.
I mean, sure, but like if it's my ideal adaptation, I can
Yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
anything I want.
No,
Maybe I just want that.
I'm
It
gonna
is
veto it.
I think we both did agree that it is the most cinematic of the
For sure.
of them. And it also does have the advantage of it you don't have to do the thing where every single franchise has to start off with the fucking introduction to all the lore. They can kind of just throw a bunch of lore at you, and because there are human point of view characters in like Lauren and Chapman, like you can kind of just look from them to some degree and be like, listen, it's fine, don't worry about it. I do agree with you though, you can't do Ellimist shit. Right. If you're doing Time Matrix as part of that movie, then the Time Matrix is like, it's an ancient mythological thing. It's basically magic. It might be magic. Don't mention the Ellimist. It does
Yeah.
magic. Don't fucking worry about it.
I'm just imagining now a universe where the primary Animorphs movies, the only human character you get to know the most is Chapman. He's for people who don't read the books, he's the most important human in Animorphs lore.
I mean, I'm not listen. I won't deny the fact that I really would love a world in which we just made a fucking movie in which there were like no human characters as your only Animorphs adaptation and it was just for like weird sci-fi crazy people, you know. And it's not like this is totally out of the question for something like Andalite Chronicles. Like Dune was really popular, and that is
Sure.
fucking bonkers and inaccessible. But people know enough about it from background lore, and you can kind of just gloss over enough of it in the movies and be like, deal with it. And people like if you do it well enough, it's good. People like it.
That's very true. You wanna hear my pitch for director?
Go for it.
I think 20 years ago, I probably would have
Mhm.
said J.J. Abrams before I realized he's a total hack. uh,
Just
who
don't
I'm
let him
gonna,
write it.
I mean, Ryan Johnson would be pretty good on that note, but I think the name that I thought of is Joe Cornish.
Hmm.
Does that name ring any bells to you?
It doesn't.
Joe Cornish is the guy who he has worked with Edgar Wright on some things. He also directed the movie Attack the Block,
Mm.
as well as he did a live action kids movie about like a King Arthur kid sort of thing, which I thought was actually pretty good.
Oh yeah, I
But it's
remember that coming out. I didn't see it, but I remember you really liked it.
yeah, and he hasn't really done anything since then. He also, I think he worked on the Tintin movie, something
I
like
was gonna
that.
say I just searched his Wikipedia and I was like, I'm seeing Tintin. I wonder if that's why you're.
No, but really, Attack the Block is. I
Mhm.
love that movie, and I feel like that is a good demonstration of. He works with kids. He's done it a lot
Mhm.
before, and it has weird aliens and stuff. And I think he would strike that tone correctly
Mhm.
between like the serious, the funny, and the weird and the cool.
That
Um,
is reasonable. Because I do think that being able to work with kids is helpful because it lets you use younger actors as opposed to using people in their late 20s and telling everyone they're 16. So like that's important that
mhm.
you as a director know how to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know who else, like, you could say Spielberg or something, but that feels kind of. I mean, Spielberg 20 years ago maybe would be good because he works with kids and he's done like Alien and war movies too. So he kind of gets the whole gamut of it.
Mhm.
But, that's also probably less likely. I think you're more likely to get someone like Joe Cornish to do
Yeah.
this.
You know
I mean,
what? Yeah.
yeah, go.
I was gonna say you mentioned Ryan Johnson as a writer, and I'm kind of on it at this point because I
Yeah,
do
yeah, hell
love
yeah.
his like really tight character work, and I do think that that's what you're gonna need to do for like a trilogy like this is kind of say like you've got way too many characters and complicated threads, and you're kind of gonna have to tie them all together
Hmm.
over this massive ass story that you've really pared down in a way that's coherent. So you kind of need someone who's capable of that.
And once again, he's got both. He's done Star Wars, aliens, and fight
Hmm.
scenes, and he's also like he has Brick, where it was all high school kids. So he has experience kind of living in both of those worlds that I think makes
Hmm.
sense. I also wrote down Taika Waititi. I don't really think that's that good of a choice, but it was another
Yeah,
guy that came to
that is a
mind.
guy.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked a lot about movies.
Yeah, we sure did.
So
Well,
three
let's just
hours
gloss over the TV show. We don't need to do that.
3 hours again today. The TV show was where when I started writing things down, I actually started to think, maybe I don't want to say this in the podcast. Maybe we should just pitch this to somebody. This is really good. I don't want to like give this away for fucking free.
I had considered trying to go episode by episode, but I did not put in that level of effort here.
I, to some extent, plotted out a series.
Okay. I could have done that, but I just was like, I'm just going to restrain myself and kind of like say, like, okay, how many seasons? What general vague tone am I going for? And ideas am I lumping together in here? But I wouldn't mind plotting out a series.
Yeah, I think we would kill it together. Well, here, let's start here. Coming back to John's email from roughly 14 hours ago.
Okay.
What are your thoughts for a network? I feel like
Hmm.
for me, the dream would really be HBO or Max. Um, Possibly I might settle for Adult Swim or FX. They do have some animation and kind of stuff. I would say no to Netflix because they tend
Yeah.
to cancel shit after one season and like
Yeah, fuck
just fuck
off.
them. Amazon, I think, is actually not a bad choice because they have been pretty good with some of their shows like going on long enough, and they do have some animation. I think that could work. I feel like maybe Amazon or Max would. I know this is kind of a weird question because the network doesn't necessarily dictate the tone of the
Mhm.
show. But to some extent, it's like kind of puts in your head like you don't want this to be on Nickelodeon. And like again on
Yeah.
Netflix, there's so much shit on there it would just get buried. You want it
Yeah, I
to
mean,
be somewhere.
here's the problem for me is that I don't watch TV at all. So I have
Mm.
like I haven't watched it since I was a lot younger. And so now I'm just like, well, who as an adult do I think is good at animated 2D shows for an adult? Because like if we're talking about plotting out the show as opposed to just saying, oh, there are some advantages to live action, it's animation, it's 2D animation. And I really have no clue who's going to handle that best. I do agree with you though, fuck Netflix.
There, we can agree on that. I also don't really have anyone in mind in terms of showrunners because
Hmm.
there's just I don't know. There's a lot, and I don't know them as well as directors. I don't really have any specifics. In terms of again, I'm thinking now. Now I'm fully just talking about this for animation. I assume you'll
Hmm.
kind of be doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's right. What I'm going to be on here.
As John said, I was gonna bring up Scavenger's Reign. I was gonna send you a clip of it, but maybe if you just want to Google it or something. But it's not only is it a great show, but it's all about it takes place on this alien world, so you
Mhm.
really get to see some weird, almost Lovecraftian, some of them fucked up, bizarre aliens that like metamorphosize and into other shit. That
Mhm.
I could easily see Hork-Bajir and Andalites and Taxons looking really good in that style.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, that is I ideally, what I want is something that is, like, stylized and well animated, but I don't you know, I don't have the reference for that in terms of, like, adult TV shows. So, yeah, I mean, this sounds good. This sounds like the sort of thing I probably want.
The other one that only occurred to me recently because I was watching it is another reference I was thinking of as well for like the tone of the show. And one of the reasons I shouted out Amazon is Invincible. I don't
Mm.
know if you're familiar at all with, I don't think you've watched the show, but maybe you've seen the comics or something.
I
Or
am vaguely familiar with a couple of the themes, some of the memes from it. I don't really know much about it at all.
sure. I mean, so it's a superhero show based on comics by Robert Kirkman, the Walking Dead guy. And I think the animation on it's a season one, like some of it's you can tell a little low budget, but for me, the style of it in terms of the look, the actual art style itself of the people versus it's a show where they go to space and there's aliens, so it has all that weird kind of sci-fi shit. I think it would suit Animorphs really well, and I also think the just generally that show, which I think is really good in some ways, I think you could point to that if you were pitching this in a meeting with not Netflix. I might use that show as a reference to say this is an example of a successful show. It's had 3 seasons, it's getting more based on existing source material that has a lot of very weird science fiction ideas, but also the main character is like a high school slash college kid who's like has a social life and has to deal with dating, but he also has a secret superhero life and he goes to space and fights aliens. And sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's silly and goofy, and sometimes it's very violent. Sometimes they don't shy away from blood and gore in that show. It's not a kids show, and I feel like it does really. You wouldn't. It's not like obvious to me to think about, but looking at comparing the two of them, I think it's a really good point of reference for how you could do a successful animated Animorphs show.
Okay.
Um,
That
you
all
haven't
sounds
watched it,
reasonable to
so
me.
so yeah, you can't comment.
Yeah, I
So you just
can't
have to
comment
assume
on
I'm
that.
right.
Although I will say this, between the two of them, uh, again, what interests me most about using 2D animation is that you get to go bonkers with high concept sci-fi shit. So the one that is specifically like doing aliens and crap like that to me sounds more appealing in a vacuum without actually looking at it.
I think that the Scavenger's Reign is more. The problem is Scavenger, and I would love both of these, but Scavenger's
Hmm.
Reign is more just. It's like that's
Hmm.
just Hork-Bajir Chronicles, you know. It
Hmm.
doesn't have the like personal relationships of kids and stuff as an
Hmm.
aspect of it. But either would be great. So because last time we talked about this, I struggled to really think of how I would want it to look, and now I
Hmm.
feel like, oh yeah, those two shows to me would be great as kind of a template. Anyway,
Sure, sure.
yeah, what's I don't know. How do you want to give me your an overview of?
Yeah, I guess I have a more generic thing if you're spelling out a show. So I'll give you I'll give you a generic thing. I've got more details about what I would do, but I'll give you the basic outline. If you want some of those details,
Yeah,
go for it. And if not, I can bring them up when you spell out your show. We'll see how much overlap there is.
yeah. I
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I had split up the show into 3 seasons. Um, in season 1, this is where I'm trying to get out my more grounded storylines, right? I'm starting off with the invasion. I'm introducing Marco's mom. I'm doing stuff with Tom. If I want to do like the conspiracy or something, you're doing it in here. Tobias is a hawk for most of this season. I'm probably doing David in here. Um, I'm introducing the Elemist at some point because I feel like ending on Tobias is a good season conclusion. Um, but like, and I want to use this to I want to get a lot more focus on your personalities. I've kind of said this before, but I do think that one of the things in the books that doesn't work for me that I really want to change in an adaptation is that so many Yerk characters are either not present or just kind of snarling bad guys, and except for a couple of resistance fighters, right? Like there's Aftran and there's Ilum with Mr. Tidwell, and that's kind of it. And you see them very infrequently, and you kind of get the sense of like, I guess there's a couple good ones, but like for the most part, they're just evil. And so what I would like to see is a lot more storylines with Chapman and Tom. I'd like to see a lot more stuff from their perspective as they're doing their plots. Oh, we want to destroy the Kandrona on Earth, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. Um, season 2 is where you get to be a lot more bonkers. Like this is where I really want to get more into the York resistance and Taylor, the Hork-Bajir resistance. The Chi can start showing up. The Elemist can start showing up. The Drode can start showing up. They start going to different locations. This is where you're kind of like, okay, I've done my more grounded plot lines and I've got some like goodwill from the audience who understands what this is. Now I can just go fucking bonkers, get all of my crazy ass shit out of here. Um and I can start setting up these like more interesting exploration. The stuff that I thought in the books, oh, this is not explored deeply enough, right? I want to see more of this resistance. I want to see more Hork-Bajir. I want to see more internal Yerk politics.
Chi.
Give me more of this shit in like the most bonkers way possible. Season 3 is kind of the end game, right? In the way that we said, maybe it would have been better if they found out they were humans a long time before they actually got exposed and had to move their families out. Maybe it would be better if their families
Mm.
had to retreat, halfway through the season and we had a
Hmm.
lot of time there. Maybe it would be better if we're introducing auxiliary animorphs for them to have been around for a long time. Um, maybe it'd be better if there was, again, we can have more stuff for Taylor to do. I want Taylor here. Um, I I maybe it would be better instead of Visser 1 just kind of getting killed immediately if there was more interaction and like we can really expand that out to a full season here, and this is all kind of end game conclusion. So I have a little bit more as to like how I might exactly lay that out, but that's the
Hmm.
general idea.
A lot of the things you said do overlap with some of my kind of broad ideas.
Okay.
At least like specifically the way of you said kind of starting with the more grounded stuff before you
Mhm.
move into the crazier stuff.
Mhm.
I didn't think as much about the Yerk resistance because I'm not as hyper fixated on it as you are.
I
But
love
I
them. I want that to be a huge part. I want Yerks to be characters. That is probably one of my number one things I want in any adaptation is more consistent Yerk characters and plot lines having to do with those characters.
some big because but there's also a few
Mhm.
places where I differ. Big questions for you.
Yeah.
Well, number one, I think probably we both agree we want 45-minute episodes, right? We don't want to do
Ah,
half hours, or do you?
yes, yes. I think that we probably need to do if you're
Yeah.
trying to like get all of the shit out there. You probably need to be doing that.
I don't know if you thought about, like, how many episodes per season or if that's just sort of up in the air.
It's a little bit up in the air, but like I do think that there is so much potential for cool shit from the books, and there is so uh
And new stuff.
yeah, and there's so much potential for new stuff that I do want to be trying for like, 26 episodes and not 13. Maybe for season 1 you could do, but like it'd be so much better if you did 26 episodes for the first season as well.
Hmm. Um, second next question, I don't know what number I'm on.
Mhm.
Because this was something that I struggled a little bit with too, and I sort of went like, you probably would mix it up, but I kind of fudged it because I didn't feel like thinking that hard.
Mhm.
Is doing like, oh, this week is the capture episode versus, oh, the Jake Yerk stuff kind of starts in this episode. Like, do you sort of take those plots and extend them and mix and match so that you're not just getting, this is only the Rachel episode and then there's no Rachel episode for 5 episodes kind of a thing?
Mhm.
Like, how do you have an idea of how you sort of dole that out?
So I definitely want to do like self-contained plot lines, right? Like,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like what I don't want to do is just have it be like a long ass mini series, right? I want each episode to stand alone. I am very okay though with mixing and matching stories. Like you when you're saying this one's the capture, right? Like yeah, probably something like the capture has to be a little bit more in line with just that, but like you know, you can there are some of the more bonkers storylines that are grounded enough. Like you can do Buff a Human. You could even do
Hmm.
the separation, right? Because you're not
Pretty good.
involving necessarily the Chi or the Elemist or the Hork-Bajir resistance or I want to contact Andalites, right? That's kind of just an extension of like here's they get to morph, right? What you know right now is there's Yerk invasion, they get to morph. And those plots can kind of like you can start using these as A and B plots throughout, so you
Hmm.
don't necessarily you can do some mixing and matching there, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think you have to.
Yeah.
I just don't know exactly how you do it. But okay, and then the other huge question that I feel like hasn't been addressed.
Mhm.
How in this hypothetical TV show of 3 seasons are you just axing, no pun intended, the Chronicles books? Where do those fit in? Is that just an episode? Are those specials or are they just gone?
Yeah, so I mean to me I it's hard for me to fit these into I mean, I guess you could fit them into a TV show. In my imagination, these are things that you might learn flashbacks about, but if you get the opportunity to have like specials or movies or something, these would be their own thing. I envision them a lot like the Chronicles. If you get the resource and the studio okay to make them, then you do that, right? Like these are I can make
That's your
a
BBC
movie
Christmas
or whatever.
special
Right, or
between
yeah, a Christmas
seasons.
special. It sort of has a place it goes in the series, but it's not like officially part of it. You can watch the series without watching it, or you, but it helps if you know it. You definitely do not have to stick to the Chronicles they have. You can easily throw a tax on Chronicles in there, and I'd be very happy. But and
Yo,
maybe
get
instead of
KA on
Visser
board.
being what it is, Visser is more just like
Part of the
oh, we're
story.
just gonna do a special that is the invasion of Earth. Like, how did that go?
Hmm.
Like, the whole flashback and nothing else
Hmm.
on its own. I don't need a narrative device for it, kind of thing.
I'll refer back to Invincible one more time. I don't necessarily
Mhm,
know that this is how I would do it for an Animorphs show, but one thing they do that I think is cool because it's based on comics, and I think I haven't read the comics, but my impression is that there are some characters who are like in space and they're not currently on Earth with the core cast. And I imagine that's just an issue of a comic because you can do that in comics. And in the show, sometimes what they'll do is they'll literally have a 22-ish minute episode focused on the main cast, and then it'll go, meanwhile, what's happening in space? And it's 22 minutes, basically like a bonus episode tacked
mhm.
on of here's what's also happening at the same time somewhere else. And I think that is one approach you could maybe take with something like a Chronicles is you could just say, here's a little bonus that's
Mhm.
also happening. I don't know. Um,
Or like one of these deals where like the back 5 minutes of every episode is the
mm,
Hork-Bajir Chronicles told over the course of the entire season or something.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
don't know. Yeah, these aren't bad ideas.
shall I get into my stuff?
Yeah, 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 go for it.
Well,
I'm interested. I'll bring in some of my more
yeah,
specifics
yeah.
as you talk about them. So,
First of all, I am surprised that your grand vision pie in the sky dream adaptation of an Animorphs show is only 3 seasons.
mhm.
My plotted out was 5 seasons, and I think it could
Oh
even be
wow, okay.
6.
I
I
I could add seasons if I decided to really get into the specific arcs and exactly how I wanted them. I'm sure I could add more seasons. But just as a general, I didn't do that. This is my rough draft effectively. So,
mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think if you added more uh um original plots to the show that
mhm.
aren't in the books, you could easily stretch it out to 6 seasons and have it feel natural. But I wrote it out for 5 with 13 episodes per season.
Okay. Yeah, well, okay. Oh, okay. So I'm doing 3 with like 26, so that's about 6
Hmm.
total.
So maybe we're
Time
kind of doing the same
lengthwise
thing.
yeah, but you might have
Different breaking points.
yeah, or like whereas I'm just kind of saying like I kind of want to do this arc at this time. You might be like this arc is this season. That's why there's 6 or something like
Right,
that. You know what I mean?
right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I will say I was more detailed in my beginning, and towards the end it was like, it's the end.
Mhm,
But,
mhm,
um, I'm with you for season 1. My breakdown of season 1
mhm.
is the core components here: introduction to this world, figuring out the morphs, building up the characters, and Marco's mom to me is the sort of thrust of, or building up to Marco's mom at least is the thrust of
Mhm,
season
mhm.
1. Um and like you said, not introducing too much of the weird shit. I would definitely have I think I said this earlier. I like the idea. My first 3 episodes are the invasion.
Okay.
My idea is, I think I said before, the whole first episode is the alien ship landing is the last 5 minutes of the episode, and then you see that in episode 2. I
Mhm,
want to
mhm.
I want to give like a good introduction to the characters before you even get that.
Sure, sure.
And alongside this, here's another change that I'm going to seed early on. Not just Melissa, Eric and David exist alongside the other kids at school. We don't know Eric's a chi yet. We don't know much about David, but like they're around.
So
S-
do you is your Eric also like me coming in season 2? Because I love the idea of Eric being there all season 1 and you don't know his
Yes.
chi.
Yes.
Oh, now
Yes.
here okay, here's an even better idea. I want more Yerk characters. They can interact. Eric is in the sharing. He's
Sure.
undercover as a Yerk.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
as the viewer could watch Eric interact with the Yerk characters and you could understand him as a Yerk character
Yeah,
until
yeah.
season 2.
I mean, what you really want is to, give like the readers, like the Game of Thrones people, you want the
Mhm.
fans to watch the show and be able to look at the people who didn't read the
Mhm.
books and go, "Oh, you don't know what the fuck's gonna happen with that guy,"
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
"Oh, fucking Eric,
Mhm.
dude, you got no idea."
Now that's interesting because I was on getting David in early. Like I was in my idea for like, oh, let's say 26 episodes. I was thinking like I kind of want to like I want season conclusion to be Tobias becomes a boy again, but I kind of want immediately before that to be like David multi-parter where he goes crazy. But I want David to show up like episode, I don't know, 15 to 18 and just join the team for a while. I want
Mhm, mhm.
episodes where he's on the team. So, like, do you w-
I'll get to
is
David. I'll get to
okay,
David.
okay. But how do you imagine him in season 1? Is he just like around or like does
Yes.
he have storylines and interact with people to like,
I
C
don't
plot
think no.
storylines?
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
total. It's like
He's
he
literally just
exists.
there.
Yeah, he has a few lines, like interacts with the kids. Maybe there's like a, when they go to a sharing meeting or they go to maybe they're at a concert or something and he's there. He's
Mhm.
not a focal. Neither of them are focal points at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe Eric a little more
I
because you do want to show him more.
yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, when you're talking Game of Thrones, I like the idea of showing Eric more because it fits with my idea of give me Yerk insider plot lines. And the idea that you have a new viewer who does not know who Eric is, who spends all of season one thinking Eric is one of the bad guys. They can't let Eric find out who they are because he's a controller. Then you get the Chi episode and Eric fucking finds out who they are, and you're like, oh shit.
Oh
And
yeah,
then you
yeah, yeah,
realize he's a fucking android and it
yeah,
just goes
yeah,
bonkers. That's great.
yeah. Okay, so my big
Yeah.
rearranging in season one is no Ellimist at all. Like I think it's just too crazy. Ellimist and She, I don't want them in like season one to me is the more we're just
Mhm.
focusing on the basics. Animal morphing and Yerks are the craziest we're getting.
Yeah, I will admit when I said I we got to introduce the Elmis because I want to end with Tobias becoming a boy, that does feel off to me because like I want Tobias season conclusion's great, but
So
so I
that's
don't mind taking Elemist out.
yeah. So for me, I want to end season one the same way of I said the second movie is. I think you do the Predator is the season finale. It's
Okay,
Marco's
okay.
mom is the bombshell cliffhanger.
Do
Um,
you do you
yeah.
think that that hurts Marco to some I guess you can change it because I was going to say one of the things I do like that Marco is very reluctant until he finds his like he finds out about his mom that fits his character to me. Do you think that that gets grating if he
Yeah,
doesn't find his
y-
mom earlier?
you might. I think maybe you pull back on that, and maybe in the
Mhm.
episodes leading up to the Predator, you can emphasize it more. But
Okay. So
yeah,
like he's like in the first three-parter he's like I don't know about this guys and then he kind of it's
mhm.
not until the very like, toward the end of the like, maybe it looks like you're building toward a season conclusion where Marco leaves or something? I don't know.
Yeah, something. Yeah, something. Yeah, you could do something like that. I think you introduce Axe halfway through. You do have Axe
Mhm.
in season one.
So that's
Also
what, 6 or 7?
episode 6. I also put
Okay.
and I won't for for listeners' sake, I won't go over every single episode I have planned out. Um, oh, and also this is another thing I wanted to do is, and I probably would do this with a lot of stuff, but this was just a specific example I thought of was like show Tobias and Cassie starting to like get psychic messages before the message
Hmm.
like that
Okay.
seed that stuff so it's not like feeling like that's kind of a mystery you're building to as opposed to just it's happening and we're resolving it in one episode.
Do you keep Cassie getting psychic messages? Because I don't know why it's her in
Who
a
gives a
great
shit?
sense. She's more empathetic. Because like, you that does not need to be a Cassie plot that they go to Axe.
Sure.
Cassie could do something else.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I don't know. It could be
But,
anybody or something. I don't know.
yeah, like, she
Um,
has an arc there, but it's not, you know,
yeah, yeah,
primary.
yeah. And also I am doing I'm putting megamorphs in here. I don't know if you were thinking
Sure.
about megamorphs, but I
Megamorphs was one of those things that I was like, you could use this to fill an episode, or you could replace it with an original plot. I don't care.
I had that
So,
as my episodes 11 and 12 are a two-parter Andalite's gift.
mhm.
And then the Predator is episode 13. And you know, I had mixed in like I had the reaction in there and the secret and the capture and some of that's like out of order from the books, but that was sort of your ones that could
Mhm.
kind of go anywhere.
Here's a question: did you leave flex episodes because for like new storylines?
I didn't, but I think that you if we were to actually plot this out in depth, you would probably add those in and maybe even just like gut some other stories and just replace them with new stuff probably.
Yeah, because I had imagined when I was like, what if I did make an episode by episode list? I had imagined leaving some of those and maybe like taking some A and B plots and just shoving them together to be like, this is the episode where I do these three books. And by these
Yeah.
three, I mean my favorite part of each and not actually the plot of any of them.
Yeah. Or like another thing I did was I put the alien just right after the message because I just feel
I
like
think that's correct. Yeah,
yeah, you
100%.
once Axe is in the show, you want to have the Axe episode there.
Yeah, and also just like Man, the alien is just the episode in which Axe joins the group, and it kinda sucks to be like, Axe joins the group and he's here, but he doesn't really feel like a part of them for several like,
Mhm.
he's got
Mhm.
that's the first thing you wanna handle.
Yeah. Okay. So
So,
moving on to season 2.
okay.
This is where, and again, broadly like aligns with you. Season 2, I'm like, okay, now we start branching out into the weird shit. So to me, like the core things of season 2 are the chi and the elemist. So I kicked it off with the
Mhm.
android. This is season premiere is our Eric episode. I
Okay.
don't know. Some of this stuff could move around.
Yeah, I
and then
mean,
I
that's a reasonable season premiere.
kind
Just,
of threw in like some of the
yeah.
other, like I said, oh, the unknown is next, but you would have like more chi involvement in it. Like
Mm.
you could add them into some of the other books where they're not, because I want them to be more of a presence because now Eric's like around.
The Unknown was one of those books that I would have probably just cut and been all like, "I think that one of your Flex storylines should involve an Andalite toilet because it's funny, but, like, nothing else about it needs to survive."
It also could, like me saying an episode is the unknown, that could be a
Mm,
very heavily reworked version. You know what I mean?
sure, yeah.
I did cut some later books. Most of them, I mean, I plotted out 5 seasons, so I am including most of the books to some at some point.
Okay, yeah, I was more than happy to just, like, axe 50% of the books and then be like, "Listen, when I say axe that book, I mean there is
Pun
one
intended.
thing that happens in it that should happen. Doesn't have to be the story."
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the
Yeah.
unknown could be whatever. So I had the stranger I put as episode 3 of season 2. And here's my big twist.
Mhm.
See how you feel about this one.
Mhm.
So in episode when the Elemist shows up, another thing that he does, I don't know if he does it directly or maybe it's a side thing. Axe and Tobias, we sort of take the disc idea from,
Interesting. Okay, okay.
but not quite. Axe and Tobias find or somehow get Elfangor's Harak Delest. And
Okay.
throughout season 2, a subplot in a few episodes is them trying to decode it. And specifically the two of them. Like they're Shorm. They're both tied to this because of Elfangor, even though Tobias doesn't know that yet. They're the guys who are working on this because they don't have to go to school. And I also had them like about to figure it out, but you know what happens before they get to look at it? Sorry, oh rip, dinosaur episode. So you got a little cliffhanger. It's like we're finally gonna find out what this thing is. Nope, 2-part dinosaurs. That's what we're doing.
That is funny. And listen, Sorry a Rip Dinosaur two-part is a thing that you want to do when you're allowed to start going crazy.
That's right. I did then they come back and do the underground. I don't know if that makes that much sense, but I was trying to fill it out. And then I had, and my idea for the Chronicles is that they would be part of the show. I had Andalite Chronicles as a 3-parter here, but I think
Mm.
maybe you intersperse it with other kind of character centric plots. And I don't know, maybe that's not super clean. I don't know how it'll work, but that's one possibility is you see it through the lens of Tobias and Elfangor kind of like seeing the flashbacks in a way. I don't know how it'll work. Maybe
Mhm.
it's VR again. Who gives a shit? And you can have other stuff going on too. Or maybe it's just a 3-parter that's just that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, you could do, like, this is like a C plot every episode, you just get a little
Mm,
bit more of it, or like the 5 minutes at the end thing, and then you somehow reveal information through the Elemist Chronicles or the Elemist Chronicles, through the Andalite Chronicles, as things are revealed in the book, so maybe you do more taxon stuff around where Elfangor or you find out Arbron's trapped as a taxon, or I don't know, like, there's something to be done here, for sure.
I just realized I put the underground as 2 different episodes in this season. So I mean, some one of those would have to be not the underground.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have to
It's
be.
so good where I'm doing it twice.
Again, The Underground is one of those books where it's like, listen, you gotta keep the oatmeal, but you don't really have to keep anything else from that book. You can throw the oatmeal into whatever plot you want.
And again, that could also be something where it's like you see the oatmeal in the background of multiple episodes. You could play with so many of these books and
Yeah,
spread
you
them
could.
out.
You could.
Um, and also Tobias becomes a boy halfway through this season too.
Oatmeal is a Yerk-centric episode. That's where we all the
There you
Yerk
go.
characters that I've defined and made,
There you
we
go.
we're only showing the Yerks doing it.
My cliffhanger season finale for season 2 is the Andalite Chronicles, but you just end it right before you reveal who his son is, or maybe like you
Mm,
don't. Something is wrong, like the file corrupts, so Tobias doesn't find out. Because I still want to do it. I'm still gonna do the Pretender. I think in season
yeah.
3.
So here's, uh, an interesting thing. So it sounds like you don't I mean, okay, so you're effectively 26 episodes and you haven't done
Yes,
David and you're not doing
correct.
Tobias as a boy yet.
No, I said Tobias would become a boy in season 2.
Oh, okay, okay. Here's another question that I was wondering about. Like, do you what do you do with the element? I guess if you are doing all the crazy shit, you get to use the Elemist a bunch of times. Um, you're introducing the Elemist and you're making him a boy in separate episodes, or are you consolidating that?
Yes, I made them separate, and that was a little
Okay,
tricky because I wanted there to be enough space in between. The way I
right.
did it was I had the Strangers episode 3, then I had the warning and the escape, and then the change.
Yeah, because
So,
I there
yeah.
is some natural sense of like, okay, the Elemist showing up is he's just doing a thing, unless you want to tie it back to an arc plot with destroying the Kandrona, which for me was a lot
Mm,
more where I was gonna go. Like the Earthbound Kandrona was gonna be part of like a much bigger arc plot in season one, and that was gonna like
mm,
kind of lead to that around like maybe a mid-season conclusion, and then we come back to it at the end to make him a boy. Um, because but yeah, like there is that sense of like, yeah, but you only need him for Tobias to be a boy until you're going really bonkers and doing escort and
right.
droids and that kind of shit. Which it sounds like we're not actually getting to that stuff yet in your season two.
Not yet. You do have a better memory too of a lot of the specifics of these book plots. Some of them
Hmm.
I was just like, "Oh yeah, that one probably makes sense there," and it might not make as much sense as I remembered.
Mm-hmm, hmm.
But like I was, working around kind of more the big picture stuff.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so now season 3, this is the David season.
Okay. I'm glad that I did not do this same thing because we don't have time to react at this level of detail to both of ours.
Well, it'll go faster. I think other seasons aren't as long, but
Mhm.
season 3 is episode 1 is the discovery. David is on the team for the whole season. And the
Okay.
whole government plot thing with the president or whatever, that's a
Hmm.
season long arc. So I stuck the threat like towards the end and the solution is the
Hmm.
finale, but that stuff would kind of just be going all throughout.
Okay.
Um and I had, I threw in here is like I said, the decision, the pretender, the extreme. I also I
Hmm.
needed another plot, so I put the forgotten in season 3 also. David's now a part of that.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that's happening. Elfangor's secret, that's a two-parter in the middle. We do that.
You are
That
doing Elfangor's secret. Okay.
yep.
I wasn't
The
sold on it. I didn't need it, but
like I said, I need to fill out 13 episodes a season.
this is
uh,
why I had 3 seasons. It's because I was like, I'll have some flex slots, and I don't
we're
need to
doing it.
do that.
I put the departure in here, like right after Elfangor's secret. I just think that would, I
Mhm.
don't know, that's an interesting episode, but at any rate,
So, how does the departure work with David? Because I was wondering that myself. I was thinking
good
when
question.
I was setting it up, I was thinking like I kind of want to put the departure toward the end of my season one, so that it kind of gives Cassie a season long arc. Because it does feel like it ends an arc for her, and it needs to be toward the end of something, but not necessarily the end of the series, and that would open the door for crazy Aftran Yerk resistance plots in my season two. But I do think that like one of the very powerful moments that I want to keep is after Cassie has sacrificed herself and all of the Animorphs have to one by one decide not to kill Aftran, to honor Cassie's sacrifice and not kill Aftran. And I don't know how David fits into that.
Well, I think even though I said he's part of the team the whole season, this could be an episode that's like, look, David's, sometimes every character's not in the show.
Hmm.
David's on vacation. It just doesn't, he's not
Hmm.
evil yet for me at this point. Like, he hasn't done a full heel turn.
But his parents are just like gone, right? Like he is kind of trapped. Or is that not the same?
No, he can, like, he's still part of the team. He's just not, like, for whatever reason. I mean, Cassie's on her own for most of this. For whatever reason, they just don't
Right.
alert David during this episode. You know what I mean?
Huh. It feels like he's got to be part of the crowd at the end, even if he doesn't have lines. Like you could just ignore it and be like, he's just there too, and he's just one of them that also walks
Yeah.
away, and he doesn't. You could
Yeah.
do it, but I would be kind of wondering, like, why did David make that choice? I don't know.
Okay. Well, my
But
next
I also had
episode.
this problem because I wanted
Yeah.
to put David toward the end, and I wanted to put this toward the end, so I wasn't really sure what to do.
I was gonna have the threat is the direct follow up to the departure. So why not? You
Hmm.
could have that kind of lead in from him.
Hmm.
And then I had Hork-Bajir Chronicles as a 3-parter right after that. And I think that to me is you kind of extend the threat, and maybe just Tobias is hanging out with the Hork-Bajirs and you're getting that perspective while this is happening.
Hmm.
Same way as the Andalite Chronicles is what I was thinking. Like, you'd intersperse it with the plot.
Okay. Okay.
And then this finale is the solution. Um, but I think I should have said that too. Like, I think throughout this season, the big pictures are: one, David; two, the development of the Hork-Bajir Valley;
Hmm.
and three, the Tobias learning about Elfangor and reacting to that.
Okay. So you're doing a lot more David. I was thinking of David more in like the back quarter or so of a 26 season 26 episode season 1, whereas you're kind of doing like a full 13 episodes with him, which I don't mind. Um I do think that there are a lot of opportunities to do more just like, oh, we're just fighting Yerk's storylines to the side with David, because not every plot in the entire episode can be what do you call it? Like the government thing. So
Mm-hmm.
like David does give you the opportunity to do some of the like, oh, there's an Andalite toilet. Oh, oatmeal. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
like infiltrate and destroy Earthbound Kandrona. Like you can do some of those things um with David. And as you said, you can do things like the extreme too, where they just go to a new location. I do think that um he does mess with the dynamic a little bit. It feels strange to me to get some of the more Elamisty Drode things in there, and it also feels a little odd to go crazy with the Elamist and the Chi. And I guess you're not going as crazy as I'm imagining going, though.
I
When you said
haven't.
you're going bonkers in season 2, you're just starting to go bonkers. You're not going off the deep end like I am. I'm like, take the
Yeah.
gloves off. Yeah.
I think that for the weight, for like the significance and the iconic nature of David for fans of Animorphs,
Hmm.
it's not enough to confine him to just a few episodes. I think
Hmm.
it hits so much harder. And I'm also kind of thinking of this like, like I would a Buffy the Vampire Slayer show. It's like, when there's a new Slayer or a new bad guy or whatever, of course there's one-offs, but generally speaking, for something of that kind of monumental impact to the story and the team, that's a season-long arc. And I just think it hits a lot harder to have him be present throughout. And people who haven't read the books are like, oh, this is just like a new cast member. Maybe it's
Hmm.
much more exciting and surprising to see him do that heel turn if it's more built up, I think.
That's reasonable. Yeah, I guess because I am imagining him as like more like 7 episodes, and like the first four are he's just on the team. But I do think, yeah, probably if you're watching the show for the first time, you see something like that and you're like, oh yeah, this is part of like some kind of arc. He's probably, if he were here to stay, he would have been here like mid-season or like start of season 2. Like something is going to
Mm.
happen.
Hmm.
Whereas if he just opens on season 3, you don't. It's like, oh, okay, he's just a new castmate. That's a decent point.
And again, stuff like I said, episode 1 is the discovery, but you could play with that and,
Yeah, yeah.
like, oh, they find out about that he's selling the cube and then they don't deal with it until episode 2 alongside some other plot. Like, it can be pulled
Mhm.
apart a little bit.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure, for sure. Because I mean, that is one thing that I do want to explore more with David is like, you know, because we talked about this on the show. Like, David is often just shown as like this evil little bastard, and he is like fucked up and evil. Ends up doing things that just like there isn't really any excuse to get there. But like the idea that he would turn on the Animorphs and even would kill some of the Animorphs, I think is potentially justifiable even to a normal non-psychopath human being in his position. And I would love to see a like real build up to that grappled with the fact that that was the case.
yeah, maybe you introduce Sadler earlier on too. Maybe there's more like Jake and Rachel's family party, and you get Sadler in there.
God, imagine if fucking Sadler is just in the invasion when you were introducing the fact that Jake and Tom are cousins. You get a whole episode to learn the
Yeah.
characters and Jake, Tom, and Rachel, and here's Sadler and all the love. That's where you really get the Game of Thrones shit, where the
Yeah.
Animorphs fans are like, "Oh fuck!"
Yeah. I mean, come on. That's the fun of this is that you get to
Right? Yeah.
in adapting it, you get to take those things that were not planned and make them planned. You
Right.
know?
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so the rest is not as detailed for me, but my season 4, this is when my two big pillars are number 1, the Elemist and Krayak. So the attack is your premiere. We're
Mhm.
full on. This is when we're getting into that shit. It's happening now.
Yeah. So one thing about that before you even begin, you've got some Elemist in season 2. Do you have any like throwbacks in season 3? Because like it feels a little bit weird to be like we're starting to get Elemist shit in season 2 because it's getting crazy, and then season 3 it's David, or is it just like it's still kind of crazy because we're doing Sario Rips and stuff in season 3?
What do you mean? What's your
W- eh,
question?
I guess my question is like it feels weird to do Element shit season 2, big Element shit
Hmm.
season 4, and then like is the season 3 we just kind of skip Element stuff?
Yeah, I
Like are
mean,
we touching on him there
I'm
or
trying to think. I'm looking. Is Elfangor's secret? Which one is that again?
I guess that is a time matrix one.
You could make it an Elemist. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a Drode in there. You could make the
I
Drode
don't
could
know
show
if.
up in season.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't
you
know
can't.
how I feel about. I almost
Yes, you
don't want
can't
to
do
talk
Drode
about
without
Krayak
Krayak.
until season 4.
Yeah, that is a
Maybe,
problem.
maybe you do the Drode and you just don't really know what his deal is yet, or
And then you find
something.
out I
Yeah.
I like the idea of because there is a big red eye thing with Jake
Hmm.
and his dream in the capture, and
Yeah.
then we don't talk about it again. I like the idea of that being a recurring motif and you don't know what it
Hmm.
is, and I
Yeah.
like the idea of that starting around when you learn, like not before you learn what the Elemist is, but around when you do, or at least after when you do. And there's no reason you couldn't have a big red eye motif linked with David in some way, and we don't know what the hell this big red eye is,
Mm.
or this
Ooh, I like
Drode
that.
pops up, and then we find out that the Drode was responsible for David or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, you could do a lot with throughout the whole series of having clues in the background that
Hmm.
maybe Krayak is or the Elemist are influencing things that you don't call out explicitly.
Yeah, and I do like the idea of thematically linking them to David before you know
Yeah.
what they are or that David is
Yeah.
bad.
And then like maybe end of maybe the season 3 finale in my vision like you get a little Krayak kind of tease for the next season or something.
Hmm.
All right, so my season 4 like I said, so I have the attack, Elemis Chronicles, it's in there. I do it. I
Go for it.
and then I kind of just threw in, I didn't go to anything too interesting here. It's like, yeah, the sickness is in there, the conspiracy. I of course included the separation because I love it. The proposal is in there. We do it good. The books that are in this section are roughly in this season. Oh, the other
Mhm.
thing I want to do in this season, though, this is where I thought more of a focus on building up and establishing the Yerk resistance. I guess you're doing Taylor in this season as well. Maybe that can be tied to it. This was where I sort of thought I was focusing on Yerk stuff is in this
Mhm.
season, which could also we had departure mid season 3, so that could kind of be like a foreshadowing of doing more of it in season 4.
Yeah, I do think that there's something to the idea of doing a departure. doesn't have to end out a season, but more like towards the back half, and then starting the York Resistance in earnest in the next season, wherever you end up
Mhm.
doing that. Some of the books around here feel like they're just here because they were there in the series. Like for me, I
Yes.
look at like the conspiracy, and I'm just like the conspiracy to me almost feels like a season one book. Like this is when we're far more grounded. I'm very interested in like Tom and Jake, and I want to know about Jake's family.
Mm,
Because we're not so bogged down in Ellimist crap that I've forgotten. And to be fair, you could put it anywhere. Like you could just say like I feel like I've done too much crazy shit this season. Um
right.
and I've forgotten the face of my father, and so I need to put this in here. Um Same with and honestly same with the separation. Like it's kind of fun to do that when shit gets bonkers, but you can put it kind of anywhere.
I'll be honest, I had more specific ideas about the first 3 seasons in terms of how I wanted to change things and arrange things. And
Mhm.
season 4 here is like, yeah, those books could be you could heavily change them, rearrange them, but it was just kind of a general well, they're built in around the big pivotal moments, which are Elamist stuff at the beginning and the end, and also I have Visser as the ending of season 4,
So
which
I'm
to me
not
is
gonna
just part of the
lie.
season,
If
yeah,
Well, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I was just gonna say if you take
because it's
your
concurrent.
season 3 and put it on your season 1, and then you take your season 4 and you stick it on your season 2, that's very close to my imagining for seasons 1 and 2.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's not very far away.
Yeah, that's why I think we're very similar in our, like, big picture view, you just condensed it a
Mhm.
little more, or you not even, you just had
Yeah.
different yeah, slightly different
Yeah, like I
makeups.
was just like fucking don't do any of this yeah, like yeah, 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 that sort of
And
thing.
then,
Because
like
that way, season 3 doesn't feel as like, oh, I do some crazy element shit, and then I fill some other stuff in here. It's like, yeah, it's all that shit.
right, and then season 5 was just basically like, I didn't have anything real interesting, it was just you start with Back to Before.
This is the season where Cassie's in Australia
Now, did I put that in
all
there?
season, the
I
whole time.
think I did cut that, but I sort of do want it in.
Mm.
I did keep the other as well. I did not include Beaver Book and no
Yeah.
Helmacrons are in my show. There are no Helmacrons.
Mm. I think
They're
Helmacrons would
gone.
be a perfect fit for season
They
3.
are out. No
100% we're
Helmacrons.
getting a Helmacrons episode.
They can have a
Might even get a
cameo.
second Helmacrons episode just to upset people.
One of them is on the Council of 13 or something. That's it. That's what you get. Okay.
I think there's going to be a whole
Um,
Helmacrons episode,
I
and
do.
again, you have your characters, so the Helmacrons episode could literally be from Visser 3's perspective, since he already knows. It could literally just be like we start off with the Yerk plot from the Yerk perspective, and then the fucking Helmacrons show in, and then the entire episode is Visser 3 fights the Helmacrons. That's my vision
Shut
for
the
a
fuck up.
Helmacrons episode in my
Shut your mouth.
season 2.
Shut your
That's what
mouth.
I'm doing.
Shut the fuck up right now. Shut the fuck up and never talk again. Stop laughing. Here's the other controversial thing is I did also include The Familiar because I love it, but I also separated it 7 episodes from Back to Before, so they're not back to back. And again, all of these you could tweak.
Mhm.
Like obviously a lot of the books that I included as episodes, reading them, I had lots of complaints and I think are flawed. Like the idea is you would write them better, you know,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
that's a
No, of
given.
course.
And then I think obviously you end on the beginning. I think you kind of do a 2-part like the whole epilogue is the finale episode. Um,
Yeah, I think when you have a TV show, you have the ability to do the whole episode or the whole ending is the finale,
yeah,
which is great. I do love that. When you're doing the familiar, do you just like what do you do? Is that Elemist shit now? Because fuck it.
yeah. I think you do.
Okay.
You either you got to come up with something. It's either the Drode or the
hmm
Elemist. You have to decide it's something. And you
hmm
could also, again, to make it more palatable, I don't even know if that would make sense, but if you reworked it a certain way, that could be the A plot with maybe Jake really gets teleported and they don't know where he is, and then you have some other shit going on Earth so that people who aren't into it aren't just like, what the fuck is this stupid episode or something. I don't know. I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense, but there's things you could do to play with it is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting because I do want to see lots
You
of
wanna see that,
the Elemist
especially
time
yeah, go
matrix
ahead.
stuff does time travel. 100% I want an Elemist shows up, does a weird time travel thing where they learn information because he's a tricky guy. I wanna do the one where what if they never got their powers? That's great. And
Mhm.
I do kinda wanna see dystopian future where the Yeerks win that is just there for the sake of showing the Animorphs as, Cassie's a terrorist and blah, 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 as opposed to just like, this is just here so you can learn about I fed you
Maybe
information.
maybe you combine them. Maybe you just make part of Back to Before that then there's also a future part, and you just, like, make it part of the same thing
Mm.
since it might as well be anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at with this is that I feel like at a certain point we're getting too many time travel stories, and I'm starting to be like, I really don't think I want to do the one where they go through all of history.
Yeah, but
It's
but
too
you
much.
you want but here's the thing with a lot of these books that I thought like, that's not like the best book. But then
Mhm.
imagining this as an animated show, I'm like, but I want to see that. You know,
But you wanna
like
see all of them? You don't just wanna pick yeah, maybe.
because they're
I because
different. They are
they are
different.
different, but I do also wanna leave room to just do something wholly new.
Well, so that's why I think if you're doing 45-minute episodes, a lot of these books plots you can either cut or
Mhm.
replace with new things. And
Oh,
so
yeah,
you
for sure,
so
yeah.
you have new stuff throughout. Like I'm using the books as a baseline, but yeah, you wouldn't be just solely sticking to exactly what's written in those books.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm like I want to see the animated world of that. Same with
You want
something like
the one where they're, like, just in World War II and I mean,
I
I
was
guess it'd be fun to see Tobias kill Hitler,
yeah,
but
you want to see Tobias kill Hitler. Well, you could just keep the parts we liked with them being Nazis and just like make that the whole episode. That would be easy.
yeah, I
Um
guess I'm just not as attached to that as I am to, Cassie the terrorist, Tobias the sharing member controller, or Elemis does a little tricksy thing.
Maybe yeah. I think that my rework now is that's part one is Nazis, and then the next episode is now they're in the future, but it's like the same continuity.
And I don't really need the Forgotten, not gonna lie. Dinosaurs
I
I need, but the
I mean
Forgotten,
I
we
put
can
that
do
in
one Sario
there
rip and be done.
because like I needed another episode. But again, that's the same thing where I'm like, I know I
Mhm,
liked that book more than you. You could easily cut that book, but I want to see if we're doing this
mhm,
well animated show, I want to see the jungle shit. Like that would be just
mhm,
visually cool to watch. And you can have better character stuff going on in the midst of it depending on where it comes in the show. You could have some juicy stuff with Tobias and Rachel or whatever you want to do that could enhance that plot and make you feel like, oh, it's a one-off adventure, but we're extending the character stuff from this other book that was more important character-wise, and now it feels like more natural because it's happening over a longer, more organic period of time amidst the weird wacky sci-fi stuff.
yeah. That's fair. I guess I agree with you on every point except that I don't
Great
care if I
cut.
don't see the jungle. So
I
so
want to
you could
see
do all
the
that other stuff for
and
anything.
they would keep it. They would get to keep the morphs. Now, you probably can't let him keep dinosaur morphs, unfortunately. I don't know. That does seem problematic.
I do want that. I do want it a lot.
So this is yeah, that's my grand vision. Um I honestly I feel like when I was plotting this out to the extent that I did, which is
Mhm,
not as much as you might think based on how long I took to talk about it. Um I was just starting to get excited like I want to let's fucking go. Let's plot out this whole
mhm.
fucking thing and call a studio up. Like I genuinely really feel like this is the framework of Animorphs is there. The things that don't work, you could easily make work, and this would be a fucking awesome show.
Yeah, so one thing that I would want to do going over your I mean, first of all, it sound so you you how did you end it again? Like, you got to the ending, but, like, it felt like there were other things in the season, or did you say there was, like, a whole season that was just the end game?
Yeah, the season 5 is Endgame, and it's really
Okay, okay.
that is where it's pretty much other than, like, the mixing around maybe of Back to Before and The Familiar, I pretty much and cutting, like, the fucking nuke book. I
Right,
pretty
right.
much just kept the progression of the last, like, 10 books or so.
Okay, so, yeah, so one thing that I would, really go
Auxiliaries.
into,
Maybe
uh
introduce them earlier, the auxiliary Animorphs, maybe. Maybe
yeah,
that's the
yeah, yeah,
season arc.
I want them for the basically at least half of my 26 episode season,
Mm,
for auxiliary Animorphs.
yeah.
Um, if you're doing them at all, I want them there
I
a lot.
I do agree. I think the 2 options are include them more earlier or just cut them.
Yes. I also, so one thing that's not in there is I want more of an arc with regard to Axe and his Andalites. And I don't mind that
Mm,
being potentially, like, for
mm,
me, when my season 3 is endgame and we have to end on, the Andalites are going to genocide everything. That to me does imply that I want to, when I'm taking like book 38 and I'm trying to figure, where Axe is meeting Estrid or whatever, and I'm trying to figure out where I'm putting that. I'm trying to get that probably into season 3 because I want Axe to have his arc where he kind of learns that the Andalites can't be trusted. Like, he's done his thing where he's a human, but now he's got to do his thing where, oh fuck, the Andalites are going to kill us. That can be end game stuff. Um
yeah.
One thing that I would want to do with your seasons is I would kind of want to go through and say, like, what what arcs does each character need to go through in order to grow and
Mhm,
change,
mhm,
and where are they going to begin and end each season?
mhm.
um and I had maybe a slightly better idea of how I was going to do that for seasons 1 and 3 for myself than for season 2, where I was just like, this is where you go crazy and you can do whatever you want, which I do think was kind of an issue. But that would, like, if I'm using your episode guide as a framework, that's something I'm 100% going back and doing, because I didn't hear as much of, like, this is the episode where Cassie starts thinking about this. This is the episode
Yeah,
where she comes to this conclusion, right? This is the
yeah,
episode where, like, maybe with Marco a little bit, right? This is the episode where he feels like this, and this is where he finds out about his mom. And then where does he go? I don't know, kind of
yeah.
thing.
No, yeah, I definitely like, I envision, the way you would plot these out, like, these are the big plot points, but I would
Hmm.
want to kind of take a bunch of note cards, of each character's arc and stick them on the board and be like, how does this fit in across the season? Where is this guy here and there? And then you like probably I think it would be very easy to after one episode, I wrote, oh, then the next book happens. But
Yeah.
when you're doing a TV show, you might be like, well, Marco's still kind of dealing with that. We're not just going to do the
Yeah.
Tobias book. So you might have to invent a whole new Marco thread that follows up on that. Like I would much more want to keep with those things
Yeah.
more so than the
Or
book
like,
does.
as an example, the separation, right?
Yeah,
You
that should
know,
have more reverberations.
Yeah, or like you can kind of do it anywhere, because all you really need is
Reverberations. Fuck.
Rachel gets split into two Rachels, right? And you can kind of figure this shit out. You probably want to do it post Axe because it doesn't have to be Eric who combines them, but you kind of need somebody who understands the morphing to be like, I can put them back or whatever. Um, but other than that, you can do it wherever. But it should be very, I think, like uh like it should be well thought out where it is with regard to Rachel's storyline,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you can do this as a kind of foreshadowing thing where you're just like, Rachel's just, she's cool or whatever, but then we split Rachel into two parts and one of them's fucking a monster and you're like, where the hell did that come from? Or you can do it like late in her arc where you're like, yeah, of course one of them's a monster, and I'm really doing this to underscore just how bad things have gotten. And which one of those feelings you want to get from that storyline is really going to change how you present two Rachels as a storyline. So you should, like, kind of, I think, have some idea before you choose which episode is the separation. You should have some idea of, like, during this episode stretch, I want Rachel to start here and end here, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I have so many thoughts just on that. Like, I mean, that's another thing that I think you could easily, if you wanted to, split that across multiple episodes. Like, you
Hmm.
could take maybe like 3 books and 3 episodes, but you're alternating those storylines as opposed to keeping them separated. And like,
Right.
maybe Rachel gets separated. Maybe the audience doesn't even know. Maybe Rachel's just acting really weird for a few episodes until somebody figures it out.
That's fucking funny. I don't That's going to be difficult to do with a bunch of standalones, which is what I want to do rather than like just, the miniseries thing, but it is very funny to me to think about doing that.
Or even like you could same thing with the capture. I mean, logistically, there's more issues with how that would work, but it's like
Yeah.
maybe in some universe, Jake is a controller for a couple episodes and you don't know yet. Obviously, that doesn't make sense because of why wouldn't he just tell the Yerks? Whatever. It's
Yeah,
just
I
an
don't know how to
example.
do that one, but
But like in general, I feel like so many of the books that are self-contained, you could take pieces of them and have them spread across a season or something. And
Mhm.
I would like that, I think, for a lot of them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's reasonable. I
I
I
did
I do think that at the end of the day, though, I would probably keep very few book plot lines. I would probably keep a lot more
mm,
book, like, elements and, like, general ideas than I would keep, like, actual plots.
I think that that is true for like if I were to actually if we
Mhm.
were to sit down and begin writing these, like the first season might stick pretty close, but like quickly I would realize, oh, well, this character has to do something else now. It
Yeah.
doesn't work. It would you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Not devolve. It would
Devolve works for me, it sounds right.
no, because that's like I feel like that's negative. It would depart. It would move away from the source
Mm.
material. Fucking, there's a fucking word. I don't know it.
Departure, why not? I don't know. The Departure, book 19.
It would stray. It would divert. Divert. That's what I want. It would divert.
Sure. This is good podcasting.
I did write down like key character arcs.
Mhm.
Like 8 key arcs of the characters that I'm like, you have to have Jake and Cassie's romance, Rachel and Tobias's
Mhm.
romance, Tobias as an outcast, Marco's mom and his family life, Axe's
Mhm.
estrangement from his people, Jake as a leader, Cassie's opposition to violence, like things that I'm
Mhm.
like, I tried to kind of make a map, almost like a series Bible of like, these are the things that you need to have
Yeah.
as their kind of character arcs. I'm ready to
Yeah.
sit down and do this. I think we should just go ahead and write this series.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Because I do think that you also need multiple of those. Like you need something like, okay,
Yeah.
Cassie's opposition to violence. Cool. That is her first arc, and it should conclude with the departure. What is her next arc? What is she doing? And there you get something
That's a
along the
big
lines of
question.
like Cassie's willingness to work with or to see the Yerks as human, right? You tie this into the Yerk resistance movement. The other Animorphs don't want to work with them. Cassie does, type of thing. And that, now I don't know, because that kind of culminates at the end where she gives them morphing tech and blah blah blah, but that kind of would be her next arc if it was explored, I think.
That is no pun intended, where I would probably make another really big departure from the books. And I would, because that was one of the things that was kind of weird, is it happens relatively early in the series. And then
Hmm.
Cassie just sort of keeps doing violence sometimes.
Hmm.
And maybe, yeah,
But
maybe
she's
you
kind
save that for even later in the show to make it more,
Yeah.
I don't
But
know.
I do think that that's kind of okay, because in the departure she finds a way to live with the violence that she does sometimes. So like it's kind of okay as long as that feels like it concludes an arc, which to me means should be near the end of a season.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think we did it though.
Yeah, I think at this point, if we talk too much, we're gonna actually write the damn thing.
See, now this is almost as long as last week's episode, but I'm in a much better mood because I'm having so much fun talking about
Yeah,
this.
it's a lot of fun.
It's a
We
great thing
have
to
fun here.
imagine this thing that will, in all likelihood, never happen. I mean, this is really I think like our ideas of what this series would be is not that crazy. And again, in light of
Mm-mm.
again stuff like Invincible, like genre television animation for adults, that's not as insane today as it was even 10 years ago. And nostalgia for the 90s, like all these things are brewing. Like it's not totally crazy to imagine someone will come along at some point and pitch this something like the Animorphs show and make this happen. Obviously not to the letter of what we thought of, but right now it does seem, nobody's talking about it. I don't know. Who knows when or how or if it'll happen, but it's not that crazy to imagine. It could happen. Maybe it's us. I think it's us. Two guys with a podcast and no experience in media or television writing whatsoever are the ones who have to make this pitch to the networks and KA and Scholastic.
This is how we'll break into the industry here.
I think that's how most people do it, is they just kind of come up with a really good idea and write a bunch of fan fiction and get hired.
Immediately, first time, yeah.
It's just so good. Well, you make like a YouTube pitch video that they can't refute.
Right.
You do the Deadpool route. Remember that?
Well, here's what we do. We plan out the whole thing, then we actually write the scripts, and then we just turn it into a YouTube teleplay.
Right. Yeah. We crowdfund it. Listeners, we'd love to hear from you if you have more thoughts, like John did, about how these would go. If you like the layout of our movies or shows, or if you completely disagree with them, you have a totally other vision. I don't know what that would be. I feel like we covered all the bases. Email us, theyerkyboys@gmail.com. You can also sign up for our Patreon, patreon.com/theyerkyboys. Last week, we talked about the one and only Ivan, including the movie. So if you want another K.A. Applegate adaptation discussion, there's more over there. This week, we're talking about Joey, the Friends spinoff Joey.
Long-awaited episode.
And I know right now we're kind of in uncertain times. I could tell you the full schedule for the rest of the show, but I don't feel like it. But just know in the coming weeks, I've alluded to it before, but we're going to talk about the comics. We're going to talk about video games, board games, audiobooks, and some other stuff mixed in there as well. That's the main stuff before our show ends. We still got a ways to go. Next week's a little bit different. We're going to be doing sort of another kind of a series retrospective esque sort of episode, which maybe I'll leave to better explain next week.
I mean, yeah, it's basically we have finished kind of all of the main media, the TV show, the books. And so this will be kind of our opportunity in the same way we did a recap on the books. This will be kind of our opportunity to kind of reflect on where we are as a podcast and just kind of, I don't know, how we've been thinking about it and
yeah. Like me coming from having not read it at all to where we are now.
Exactly. Before we kind of do the auxiliary stuff that's less important.
Sort of a spiritual successor to this episode.
Yeah.
Do podcasts have spiritual successors? I mean, actually, it's a direct successor because it's the next episode.
Whoa.
So stay tuned for that. A lot of fun stuff. I am very much looking forward to our future episodes. They're going to be fun.
Yeah.
Oh, and you can follow me online, jonathaness.com if you want.
Thanks everyone for listening. Tune in next time when we'll be doing a series and podcast retrospective on The Yerky Boys.